So if we can get everybody in here and ready. All right.
You can begin.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jackson. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Charlotte City Council Business Meeting, our June 14th meeting. And now I want to call this meeting to order. Tonight's meeting is being held as a virtual meeting in accordance with the electronic meeting statutes. All the requirements of that statute are being met through electronic means. We are really always glad to have the public and media who are not in attendance with us today. We've got several folks from the media inside the space that we are today. But if you're not here physically, we hope that you're watching us on the government channel, the city's Facebook page, or on the city's YouTube page. So we're going to begin with introductions provided, and I believe that we will start with those folks that are at the in the building, and we'll just go ahead and start. I'm Vi Lyles, and I serve as mayor, and we'll go ahead to the mayor pro tem.
Good evening. I'm Julie Eisel, Mayor Pro Tem and serving at large.
Good evening and happy Flag Day. I'm Greg Phipps, serving at large.
Braxton Winston at large.
All right. Mr. Bacard.
Tari Picard, District 6. Malcolm Graham, District 2.
Larkin Eggleston, District 1.
Ed Driggs, District 7.
And we have two council members joining us virtually. I'd like to recognize our at-large member.
Dimple Ajmera, at large.
Followed by our district representative.
Renee Johnson, District 4.
All right. Now I'd like to have the staff that support us to make it possible for us to have these meetings. I'd like to start with our city attorney.
Patrick Baker, City Attorney.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Billy Tons, Interim Deputy City Clerk.
Stephanie Kelly, City Clerk.
All right.
Renata Jackson, Office of Constituent Services.
Kay Cunningham, Mayor's Office.
All right. We have additional staff that support us that are in a separate room to maintain. We are still under our pandemic rules and the emergency orders, and we hope that everyone will continue to keep themselves safe, get the vaccination, and really excited to see that we're able to gather together, but we still have to meet that place where we have enough immunity for us to change the way that we are operating from the current state to something better for the future. So get out there and get your vaccination. Remember, you can win $1 million in that vaccination lottery. Governor Cooper has set that up, and I think that there's a lot to be said about that, but I also think it's just a lot to be said about just getting your vaccination for your friends and family as well. So with that, we begin our meeting with an invocation or an expression of inspiration, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight, Councilmember Driggs will give our invocation, and Councilmember Graham will lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Driggs.
Thank you, Mayor. The invocation tonight is adapted from a blessing by Charles Chaput, who was the first Native American Archbishop of the Catholic Church. It is a non-sectarian blessing, however. So please pray with me. Heavenly Father, thank you for the gift of life and the opportunity to serve the people of our city. Help us to act with character and conviction. Help us to listen with understanding and goodwill. Help us to speak with charity and restraint. Give us a spirit of service. Guide us to be the leaders your people need. Help us see the humanity and dignity of those who disagree with us, and to treat all persons with the reverence your creation deserves. And finally, help us to build a community worthy of all those who choose to live here. We ask this as your sons and daughters. Amen.
Thank you. Let us stand for our Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Graham.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you, everyone. The next items that we carry through are those resolutions that we have to recognize various occasions and people. Today we're going to start first with one the Mayor Pro Tem will read for us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whereas the nation celebrates June 17th as Global Garbage Man Day, and whereas no collection of people, be it state, city, township, or county, could efficiently run without these people. And whereas the men and women employed by the city's Solid Waste Services Department perform their jobs daily with excellence in all weather conditions and on most holidays to keep our local community and the world at large safe and healthy. And whereas waste and recycling workers contribute to a tidy and clean community, and whereas the Solid Waste Services Department provides service to more than 72,000 residential units each day and collects more than 433,000 tons of refuse, recyclables, and yard waste annually. And whereas the City of Charlotte values and celebrates its sanitation engineers who serve residents and local businesses. Now, therefore, I, Alexander Lyles, Mayor of Charlotte, do hereby proclaim June 17th, 2021 as Sanitation Engineer Appreciation Day to be observed in the City of Charlotte in recognition of the importance of our solid waste collection workers and in accordance with the aforementioned National Day of Recognition.
So thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I think all of us across this community, all of our residents, especially our residents in housing, we know how important the service is. It's probably the #1 thing that people know about our community. And the work that gets done is done by these fabulous folks that are in our Solid Waste Services Department, led by Rodney Jameson. And I just want to say thank you. We're going to celebrate a little bit more this weekend, and on Friday I'm going to go out, and I hope that we're going to have time to talk about what you'd like to talk about as you work here in the city, but I want to just brag on you because that's what you deserve. So thank you very much. Our second proclamation is in recognition of Juneteenth coming up. Whereas on June 19, 1865, nearly 2.5 years after President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, Union soldiers led by General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, bringing to some of the last enslaved Americans news of their legal status as free persons. And whereas the 19th of June has become nationally recognized as Juneteenth to commemorate the abolition of slavery and honor the strength, determination, and triumphs of African Americans in the face of this extreme oppression and hardship. And on this anniversary each year, individuals, communities, and organizations across North Carolina, here in Charlotte, and our country celebrate African American heritage, culture, freedom, and tradition. Whereas all Charlotteans of all colors, creeds, and origins share a love of and a respect for freedom, whereas work is underway in our city to eliminate the current effects of past and current racial discrimination within policing, housing, financial lending practices, job placement, and other sectors of our society. And whereas the City of Charlotte encourages all people to observe June 19th as a day to reflect on and learn from the past, a day of healing and renewal, a day to spur on efforts to build a brighter future for all. Now, therefore, I, via Alexander Lyles, Mayor of Charlotte, do hereby proclaim June 19, 2021 as Juneteenth Day in Charlotte and recommend its observance to all of our people. Thank you very much. There will be a number of opportunities for celebration of Juneteenth in this community, sponsored by various arts, cultural, and community-based organizations. I hope that we'll all find a place that we feel comfortable going and participating with some of those celebrations. So with that, we're going to go into our consent item questions, Q's and A's. Are there any questions on consent items? Hearing any questions? Hearing no questions, then we're good. So we're going to proceed to our action review. But before we have our action review, there are 2 items that I want to speak to prior to beginning our meeting. First is the current legislation under review by the General Assembly on the local elections added one more task to the Budget and Effectiveness Committee, chaired by Ed Driggs and with participation by 4 of our council members. And they are adding that we're looking at, for the Budget and Effectiveness Committee charge to recommend a process to the council on how to be consistent with both state and federal laws now, and may include the discussion and recommendation whether or not the Charlotte City Council election should be bifurcated, and what their guiding principles are as they develop the recommendation for that decision. And so we're adding that to the Budget and Effective Government Committee's work, which they are going to try, I hope, to meet again this week to be able to address. We didn't get, I think at your last meeting, you didn't have time to get to the redistricting portion of the rest of the
We didn't,
charge.
but this adds a new urgency, Mayor, because if the intention was to try and have those at-large elections this year, that timeline is already quite compressed, so we would need to get busy.
So
I'll find out when the members are able to meet.
I
in
would
the
hope
near
that you
future.
could do it this week,
Yeah.
if at all possible. But of course, we still have to wait for the legislation to pass. We're still waiting to see what the final version will be. And then the second thing that I wanted to do is that I want to invite all of the council members to participate in the Charlotte Pride Weekend of Service on August 21st and 22nd as our LGBTQ residents begin to celebrate Charlotte Pride Month. And with our council break beginning in July, I want to share with the community that the recommended non-discrimination ordinance will be on the council's August 9th agenda to be a part of the recognition of our commitment to equality and equity during Pride Month. I want to thank each of you. Many of you have had lots of conversations around this, for the work that you've done to build consensus around the ordinance, and I look forward to our August 9th vote as we celebrate Pride Month. Again, the date of our weekend of service, August 21st and 22nd, you'll be getting more information about how to sign up for activities that will help our community see the impact that our LGBT community members can make in a community. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and recognize the manager for the agenda review for our action items that we have tonight.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. So tonight we have 2 items on the action review agenda. The first one is leveraging city-owned land for affordable housing, and that presentation or update will be tag teamed by our new assistant city manager, Brent Cagle, and Pam Weidman. And then, as we do annually, we have an update on the municipal service districts, and that would be both Darlene Heater and Michael Smith, who's with us tonight. And Mayor, before I turn it over to Brent and Pam, I would just like to talk a little bit about the presentation tonight and what you'll see over the course of the next 2 weeks. So in my 30-day memo last time, we talked about having a staying in place strategy discussion on the 28th of June, as well as we will have Sean Heath give you an update about where we are with some of this last round of stimulus funds. It's difficult to just jump into this leveraging city-owned land for affordable housing without having a bigger picture. So as we start to think about it, there are a number of initiatives that are happening, and there are a number of opportunities, much like the $14 million that is in, hopefully, the budget that you approved tonight, that would be in our corridors, which is both for housing and some workforce and economic development initiatives, as well as programs that have worked well during the first year of the corridors of opportunity. But also, as you start to think about it, and Michael may talk about this a little bit later, I won't steal your thunder, Michael, but the Charlotte Center City Partners have a 2025 homelessness strategy that's being discussed across the community. So there are opportunities for us to think about housing, homelessness, some of the funds that are in the FY 2022 proposed budget, as well as stimulus funds and partnerships between the city and the county and the private sector. So this is not just limited to the discussion tonight. It's one piece of it. And I had I would call it a great discussion with Councilmember Graham last week. And he said, well, I want more. So let's start off with what we have tonight, knowing that over the course of the next 2 weeks, we'll have more information about additional initiatives. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Brent and Pam.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and members of Council, for having us tonight. Ms. Weidman and I are going to go through a brief presentation to talk about how we would envision leveraging city-owned land. Part of this will be starting out with just an explanation of the roles and responsibilities, moving on into the affordable housing and real estate portfolio, talking about the parcels that we've identified for affordable housing, and a discussion of some of the other properties that we've identified and what the council should expect on those, and also looking at next steps. Now, I'll say a couple things up front. I want to thank all of the city staff who were involved in this. A lot of time and energy went into this, but especially Housing and Neighborhood Services and the General Services Department worked very long hours trying to pull all of this together. And I'll also point out that tonight is really informational only. There is no decision required, but we do want you to hear where we're at, know where we're going for the next steps, and also be aware of it as some of these items that we discussed tonight become future actions or action items for the council to consider. Oops, next slide. Okay. So a little bit real quick about real estate services. Sometimes I think we forget that the city is a very large landowner in the city of Charlotte, as well as all of the other private entities that own property. So what does real estate do? Real estate is a division inside of the General Services Department, and they basically buy, sell, and manage the city's property portfolio. Real estate also coordinates with city departments to identify their property needs and to purchase the properties for their use. A good example of this would be when it's time to build a new police station or a fire station or any variety of city service centers. Real estate is who we call when we need property. The other thing that real estate will do is try to marry up vacant properties with needs, right? So sometimes we may not have a vacant property, sometimes we may, but they're always trying to find the perfect match for our needs. They also manage properties that are donated to the city, and tonight we'll talk about a couple of those types of properties. So they manage those inside of the portfolio as well. And the last bullet here I think is important. The way real estate operates or has traditionally operated is they retain properties, they purchase properties and retain properties that are needed to support city operations, right? So that's why when you'll see from time to time we dispose of properties, it's because those properties haven't been identified as a property with a city operational need. So real estate's role in the RFP or the eventual RFP that will be moving forward. Real Estate and Housing and Neighborhood Services conducted a review of the city's current inventory of vacant land. They also conducted interviews with city departments to understand what their future property needs would be. So as they started to look at what we have that's vacant and what the next 5-10 years look like for new properties, those needs that the city has, they tried to marry that up with vacant properties that didn't have an identified use. Now, the other piece of this, and this is where Housing and Neighborhood Services really helped, they also have to look at other factors. We do have many vacant pieces of property, but not all of those vacant pieces of property are actually developable. A lot of the vacant property we have are really remnants that are left over from other projects, and because of topography or size or other factors, being in a floodplain, for example, they may not be actually developable. And so they look at that, they look at the potential future uses, and then for affordable housing, they also put that through another set of guidelines, and Ms. Weidman will talk about those here in just a second. So what were the results? We've identified 6 properties for affordable housing. That represents approximately 24 acres of land. Now, not all of those acres may be developable, but the parcels themselves or combination of the parcels equals about 24 acres. We also have identified 1 property for affordable housing with the possibility of a mixed-use component included in it. And then we want to talk to you about 2 additional properties that we've identified for future study and future inclusion in an RFP at some point in the future. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Weidman to go through the affordable housing properties.
Thank you, Mr. Bakari. You tried. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. It's great to see you all in one place, many of you all in one place. And to the City Manager, thank you for allowing us to be here to give this brief update. Thank Mr. Cagle, and allow me to add to his thanks, the thanks to my colleagues in General Services. This has really been a team effort, and the team in Housing and Neighborhoods to get us here tonight. So I'm just going to walk through the 6 parcels that we've identified for potential uses of affordable housing. Just in terms of background, I'll just remind us that you all approved your housing framework in 2018. Since that time, last summer, we reviewed that housing framework. The mayor reminds us all the time that we ought to be reviewing that and we ought to be evolving it. And the thing that came out of the review last summer was that you all agreed to set aside a portion of those of the funds, our housing trust fund dollars, our bond dollars for home ownership. And so you'll hear about our thoughts about some of this as I walk through. And then just to give you all just further applause, the housing framework continues to be used as a model across the country. Most recently, Atlanta, Georgia, Denver, Colorado, and Raleigh, North Carolina. People really, really like your framework that you approved and the pillars that it's built on. So just want to continue to appreciate you all for that. Within that housing framework, you'll recall that it was 3 pillars, right? It was building new, it was preserving what we already have, and then it was creating family self-sufficiency. And then embedded in those 3 pillars, one of the strategies that's relevant to the conversation tonight was how do we use publicly owned land to advance affordable housing? And let me just, before I get further in there, the manager mentioned the work that is being led by Center City to do this housing and homelessness strategy. As a part of that, I have the privilege of co-leading kind of the Grow Affordable Housing work stream. And so within our early meetings, again, using publicly owned land has come up, and it still remains to be one of the strategies that people are interested in and that we believe we ought to use. And so you guys are far ahead in terms of doing that. So thank you for that, City Council. Let's see. Am I doing these or are they? Okay, I'm sorry. Next slide, please. So Mr. Cagle alluded to this earlier. In 2019, you all approved some guidelines about how we would evaluate and dispose of city-owned property, particularly for affordable housing. And just some of the high-level things that were identified in that policy was, obviously, we want to achieve housing for households earning 80% and below the area median income. We want to have long-term deed restrictions when we utilize properties in this way. We do this because we want to reduce cost and we want to be able to monetize our assets, right? And so this helps us further leverage our housing trust fund and other dollars that are needed to do long-term affordable housing. And then some of the things that we want to look at are proximity to transit, how are they zoned, are they near commercial employment centers? We want to make sure that we're not using land that is in the floodplain. So there are about 13, and I won't read those all to you, but 13 categories that we looked at to make sure that that properties are suitable for affordable housing development. If you go to the next slide for me, please. This is not a new concept, and many of you all will recall that you've done this before with some city-owned land. And I won't go to the granular detail, but I will tell you, as a result of what you've previously done, there are about 200 housing units, some multifamily and some home ownership, that are in the works through the use of publicly owned land, your city-owned land. One of the most recent ones is the Vantage Point site. Mr. Graham, that's in your district, where we're creating, I believe, up to 37 units of affordable for-sale home ownership. Another recent example is the Morris Field property, Ms. Wallington, that is in your district. That is a partnership with Habitat, where we're creating for-sale home ownership opportunities as well. So just wanted to remind you guys of that. If you go to the next slide for me, please. As Mr. Cagle said, we have a lot of city-owned properties, but this funnel we run it through the funnel, if you will, there. And again, I won't read this to you, but we want to make sure that whatever we're putting out in an RFP, that it is suitable for affordable housing development. We never want a case where we, put something out and it's not able to be developed, or it's going to cause us a bad news story. So we really spend a lot of time making sure that these are suitable. So let me just spend a few minutes going through the proposed parcels. If you go to the next slide for me, please. So Wendover Road, it is a total of 9 parcels, 7.5 acres. It's currently zoned residential 4 and 5. And Mr. Driggs always keeps me honest. There he is. In terms of, we need to know what the appraised values are. And so these are the current appraised values on these sites. Now we could do another appraisal, and we'll determine if that is necessary. These appraisals are, I believe, they're about a year old. And so by the time we get to the development phase, if we need to do another, before you all approve the land transfer, we will do it. But we don't know if we need to do that at this point. But Wendover, we believe this one is, these lights here are always interesting for me. We believe this one is most suitable for some type of for sale affordable product type. Again, we don't want to be too prescriptive to limit the developer's creativity, but that's what we believe there. So, and notice I said a product type. If you look at that area, you see lots of townhomes there. There is some level of density there today. But again, you can see that it's right along Wendover Road, and so we believe that this is a very suitable opportunity for some type of affordable there. We acquired this one. This was left over from, these remnants were left over from the Wendover Road widening, and that's, I think we acquired them in 92, 93 time frame. So if you'll go to the next slide for me. I'm sorry. So these are bounded between kind of District 5 and District 1, so they're shared. Let's see.
Don't worry, there's an echo in the room.
Okay.
There's an echo in the room, don't worry.
Trying to get the presentation.
I don't often hear myself talk, so that's really interesting. I'm not sure if I particularly like to either. Mr. Eggleston, I can follow up with you on what the cross street is. Admittedly, I can't really see the map on this screen really good, but I'll follow up with you on what that cross street is. Let's see, Providence Road West. So this one is in Council District 7. This is left over from the recently new CMPD South Division Station. That was open, or we celebrated the opening a couple of weeks ago, and so there's a remnant left over. It was acquired in 2018. What you will see here, kind of the yellow outline, and I don't know if this pointer works, but basically, although this is 2.6 acres, probably only an acre of this is developable. So it's kind of everything to the left of the red line. We believe is developable. The stuff kind of in the lower is tree safe, so that's not developable. So that will probably equate to some type of denser development development. Although we've done this before, this is an example where we're doing something a little bit different because we want to make this site as ready as possible for the development community. And also we were trying to make sure that this was in line if people needed to apply for tax credits or some other type of funding that has a timetable on it. And so what we're doing here, and again, this is new, the city is leading the rezoning on this one. And so that's not to say that the community won't still have an opportunity to input, but we wanted to do that just to take that off of the plate of the developer here. We also think that this is a great opportunity for perhaps our men and women who work at that police station to have an opportunity to have some type of housing really close to their station should they choose to do that, to live there. If you go to the next, well, this one is great. Newland Avenue. This is just one parcel. It's currently zoned residential, R12 multifamily. You can see the appraised value there. This is along one of our corridors of opportunity. And so we believe also that this could be a ripe site for some type of affordable for sale product. Again, we don't want to be so prescriptive as we don't leave room for the creativity of the development community. But this being along one of our corridors of opportunity, it's in the LaSalle, Lincoln Heights area. And so we're really excited about the possibilities here as well. If you go to the next slide for me, this is along the Blue Line extension. It is University City Boulevard. I notice Ms. Heater is here today, so welcome, Ms. Heater. This was appraised as recently $1.3 million. And we believe that this will be a great opportunity for some type of development here. So we will include this one in the package too. This is, again, a city-led rezoning. We haven't determined the exact zoning type that we're going to request, but we know it will be some type of TOD, some type of transit-oriented development here. So more to come on that. If you go to the next slide for me, this is the Archdale. You've heard a lot about this one. This is 6.3 acres. It's currently zoned R4. I do want to be totally honest with you. This is a challenging site. It's challenging for two reasons. It's challenging because of its lack of access and its topography. And you can see that you have the Little Sugar Creek. That's that blue that's running right down beside it. We believe that if it is going to be developed, that it will probably be developed kind of in the hockey stick down in the bottom, if you will, because that grants the most opportunity for access into the site. Again, this one we know it's challenging going in, so we may or may not get any takers on this. What I would say about this, though, is an opportunity. You all will recall that you all granted trust fund dollars for Lake Mist, I think it was last summer, and so this is about 1.5 miles from Lake Mist. That is a NOAA that you all approved, and you also approved a rental subsidy for that as well. And so we think that this could be a great opportunity if we can determine how to develop it. So I did just want to point that out. If you go to the next slide, this is one of the two sites that you all will recall was donated from the Brooks family. It is along South Boulevard. We believe this is an ideal site for redevelopment. We believe it's ready to go. And so we're really, really excited about this one as well. It's along the Blue Line. If you go to the next slide for me, please. I think that ends, that's kind of the 6 slides that I'm going to go over. Brent will come up and talk about the 3 remaining. But what I would say in terms of what happens next, and Brent will hit this again, as far as the ones that are being developed for just straight affordable housing, we are in the process right now. We updated you tonight. I talked to you about the 2 that are in the rezoning process. You all will receive, for the ones that are in the zoning process, obviously you all will see these on your zoning document in a couple of months, and we'll keep you updated on that. We're working on drafting the RFP, so that'll be completed by the end of November. And then, those will be back. We will have released it. Those will be back by the end of November. We'll be working with the developers to select the developer who presents the proposal that we believe best based on your goals and where we want to grow as a city. And then we will publish our Housing Trust Fund RFP. So this is the land. We'll publish an RFP in the event that people need both land and money. We're not saying they will. We don't know at this time, but we want to create an environment where we can do land and money at the same time. And then we'll be back to you all in May to award any HTF allocations that are needed. Please know that we will be going as fast as we can. We know that you guys have been patiently waiting on this. We've said we are doing it. And again, we'll keep you updated as we go through this process. And at that time, I'll turn back to Brent to complete the presentation.
Okay, so we have 3 more properties left to go through. Let's start with England Street. So England Street is the second of the 2 donated parcels. This parcel is an interesting parcel in that it's rather large, 15.64 acres. And I apologize for not having this map, but if you look at this site, the South Boulevard site is basically adjacent to this site. It's just off this map because this map is only showing the one site. So they're basically a pair. They're right next to each other. Again, it is zoned correctly or is in a good zoning place with TOD-CC. Current appraised value is $2.5 million. I will say that as far as the size goes, this site does have some topography issues. So we're not sure exactly what the developable size of this property is, but it is significantly less than the 15.64 acres. Now, I will say we put this one into a separate category because we'd like to see what the market brings. It could be all affordable housing. It could be affordable housing with some mixed use components, but we don't know what that is, and we really would like to see what the market brings. I would say that, so as Pam pointed out, the process for RFPs that are straight affordable housing will be moving forward. This property will move forward on a similar timeline as well. It is a separate RFP because this RFP would allow for the possibility of mixed use components possibly. Okay, next slide. And then there are 2 remaining properties. Next slide. Eureka Street or Double Oaks. So this, again, I'm sure the council is very familiar with this site. One parcel, about 11.1 acres. It's zoned R22 MF. The appraised value is $3.1 million. And again, we think that this site would be desirable for affordable housing, but possibly affordable housing with mixed use components. I will also say this site has a conceptual plan that is completed already, and that conceptual plan would envision affordable housing with mixed use components. Next slide, please. So Statesville Avenue, and these 2 I want to talk about almost in tandem. Statesville Avenue, most of the council will probably be familiar with the old JCC site. That is Statesville Avenue. And so this is the old JCC site, and you can see the JCC site, currently it is one parcel that includes fire headquarters. The red line at the bottom of the map would be the subdivided parcel. So we would envision needing to subdivide this parcel, and then it would be the northern half of the site or the top half of this map that would be offered up. So this site, it's a 10-acre parcel, but it will be something less than that, maybe 6 or 7 acres after it's subdivided. It's currently zoned I2 and portions are MUD O. And so at some point, this will need a zoning change. But what we'd like to do is think about this in terms of affordable housing with mixed use components, but because it's also in the same proximity of Double Oaks, we'd like to think about how these 2 properties work together in this area. And so when I talk about further consideration, what we really need is a little more time for the planning staff for the housing and neighborhood staff and the general services staff to come together, think about what we've already completed for Double Oaks, and think about how that works together in harmony with this site as well. Okay, next slide. And so this is just kind of bringing it home. Pam already talked about the timeline underway now, developing the RFP, the rezoning process, the city-led rezoning process on the 2 parcels that will have city-led rezoning is that we've already started those conversations with the planning department. We would anticipate in the fall that city council would have the rezoning decisions before council, and we will be publishing the city-owned land RFP or RFPs in this case. November through February, working with developers as we select the RFP, going through contract negotiations, site conveyance, finishing out all of the contract work. January through February of 2022, moving into publishing the Housing Trust Fund RFP, and April through May of 22, awarding the trust fund allocations and land conveyance. With that, I will wrap up. Next slide. Questions?
Thank you very much. Before we go to council questions, I want to first just remind us of the families that donated property for this purpose. The Brooks family, prior to the loss of his brother, they made this decision because they wanted to give something back. When everyone was announcing we're going to give you money, he said we're going to give you land. And I think that was a great decision then. And even today, looking at through the lens of what land cost in Charlotte, what they've done was, it was visionary. And then I just also want to recognize the family of former Commissioner Jerry Blackman, who left in his will those 20 acres to say, I believe in the mission that you have adopted and approved as a city to provide affordable housing. And the land is zone industrial. And he could have done a lot of things. Jerry Blackman was known for his business acumen and a lot of acquisitions. But at the time that he really knew that he was going to be passing away, he left the 20 acres to the city for affordable housing. So I just want to say thank you to them and always acknowledge that this is possible through their generosity, but more importantly, I think through their commitment to the city as residents, long-term residents, to knowing that we can do things like this and make it better. So with that, I'm going to recognize Mayor Pro Tem and then Ms. Watlington and Mr. Driggs.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I have a question. Double Oaks was answered, but the other question I have, when we look at some of these land values and where they are, and Pam, you had mentioned that some of that topography is challenging. Do we look at it and say, let's talk to the county about this becoming a park, or just really consider green space, the need for green space, especially in neighborhoods that don't have access to parks?
Yes.
Are any of these contenders for that?
Possibly some of these may be. What I would say is as Housing and Neighborhood Services, as the city goes through this process, we may find that some of these are better suited for other uses. What I would say on that is the Planning Department, Housing and Neighborhood Services, and General Services have already done a first pass on that and believe that we think that these are viable, but as the market responds, I think that we'll start to learn more. The other thing I'll say is the Planning Department is also looking at some of the areas, so I'll use England Street as an example. The undevelopable portion of that site may be able to be used as a green space. Now that's something that a developer may not be willing to carry as part of their proposal, but if the developer, for example, proposed on a portion of the site, leaving the remainder, that would give the city an opportunity to reimagine what might be able to be done with the remainder of the site.
Okay. So, and I guess that's good to know, but then I guess the question is, were there other parcels that didn't make this cut that we could look at green space. Because my concern is that we're really struggling, right, with the comp plan as to how to add more housing, but we really haven't talked about how to add more green space. We haven't had a lot of conversations about that. We talk about greenways, mobility, but just pure green space. And I think I walked through Freedom Park yesterday. It was so crowded, and people want to be outdoors. They want access to green space, and we just, we got to keep that on the tracks as well as we keep moving quickly to try to build new housing. We want folks to have access to those amenities.
So we can definitely, I can find out the answer to that question. If we have not already done a pass-through vacant properties for green space, that is certainly a great thing to do. And it is definitely something that our real estate division could do and will do.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Ms. Watlington?
A few questions. The first one is on slide 8 where it talks about just trying to calibrate, where it talks about the housing framework. Where it says location, can you just dive into that a little bit? Really what I'm looking for is where we consider the proximity or the average household income of the buildings in close proximity. Is that captured in that location criteria there?
So basically, if you, on the under where we have areas that promote diverse, inclusive, and complete neighborhoods, and so it would be best captured under there. What I would also remind you of, Ms. Wallington, is to the extent that particularly, well, not just housing trust fund dollars, but we have our guidelines, right? And so we will run these properties, once we get proposals back, we will run these by those guidelines to really be able to score those. And really, the different proposals, we will select kind of the best one that is consistent with kind of your criteria, all the things that you all talk about every Monday night. And we know that one of those is kind of price points, creating diverse neighborhoods.
Okay. The next one is, just so I'm clear, are these all being offered as for sale development opportunities, or how does?
No, they're not. We're going to do an RFP, and like I said, we don't want to limit the developer's creativity or our opportunity to maximize the unit count. We do know that there are some areas, though, that we believe, based on kind of the surrounding neighborhoods, one of the things that we do want to make sure is whatever we're doing fits in with characteristics of the surrounding neighborhood and acknowledges opportunity to growth. But we will not be putting all of these out for sale opportunities.
Okay. My next question, and you spoke a little bit about it already, but what exactly is our role, particularly for the land that may be developed with for rent product? What is our role, or do we have some sort of continued ownership, or is it we're offering the land and after that it's private?
Right, that's an excellent question. So you'll recall on the for sale, right, we have to transfer the land. We don't maintain any ownership of the land because we have to do that because we want to create wealth, right? But for the multifamily, we enter into long-term leases, right, because we want to always have, we don't want to give away our land, but we do long-term leases on that.
Okay. You answered my question about rezoning. Can you speak a little bit to how that matches up with the place type mapping process? The reason I ask is because obviously you're having to select a future land use, so I'm just wanting to know how that marries up to that process.
And so we will be working.
I'm not opposed.
I want to make, so that's why we're doing this kind of in a team effort, right? And so planning is a part of our team. And so we will be looking at what we believe as a city to be the future land uses are. That's probably not a direct answer to your question, but just know that we will be working collaboratively with our planning team to make sure that we understand what those proposed place types are.
Okay. Along the lines of obviously trying to use city resources to create affordability, I know that we've talked a little bit with the development community about things like fee waivers for utility taps and those kinds of things. Have we thought anything about that in regards to how we could prepare the land or how we could make this a more viable option for affordable housing?
So one of the ways we are doing that, one of the primary ways that we've heard over and over is the rezoning, right? And so, and that's no small feat, right? It's because we've got to become, Housing and Neighborhood Services, we've never led a rezoning process, right? And so I'll ask for your patience now as we go through that. But you will recall for developers, the rezoning process is kind of time and money, right? And so to the extent that we're taking away that barrier, that is huge.
So that one, and I don't know order of magnitude what the other costs may be associated with, but an opportunity in addition to the rezoning. Does that make sense?
It does, and we've had we've talked long and hard about kind of water fees and tap fees, and some of those things we just have to have, right? People, that's a part of development, but we are very aware, and we continue to talk with the development community about ways that we can remove barriers, and when there are ways that we can legally, and we are trying to do that and trying to be smarter, but I will not promise that we'll be able to remove every kind of barrier or development cost.
Sure. As an aside,
sure.
First of all, this is great work, so I'm appreciative of the work you've done here. It has sparked an additional idea. It reminded me of some conversations that I've been having with the Wilmore community, and there is a property where the Wilmore School sits, and they have been working with a development team on a possibility of doing some mixed use there. It's not within our possession city-wise, but it had been on a previous surplus list for CMS. So. That is an example of some other places that we may be able to search through our other government entities that might have some land that we could work together to get some affordable housing on. So I'd love to see what might be the outcome of that kind of investigation.
Yeah, and Ms. Wellington, let me just say, duly noted, we have.
I think this did come before.
Yes, we've had that conversation for at least 5 years, maybe 7 years with the county, and the county has since stepped up, but the school board particularly, and there's some legal ease. I'm not an attorney, but they can't do what you can do in terms of conveying your land for a nominal amount, leasing your land. They have to sell their land, as I understand it. And again, I'm not a legal expert on that, but for the fair market value, right? And so that does not help a developer when we're trying to minimize costs or to leverage costs. And so I agree with you, and that's why you hear me say the use of publicly owned land, but that one is a little bit harder nut to crack.
Gotcha.
And I think, Ms. Watlington, if I recall, we did do the rezoning to try to give that use so that the neighborhood, it was compatible with what the neighborhood association wanted, but that's been years, and it's very difficult when the school system owns the property.
Yeah.
So.
And then just my last question is Brook Hill. I'm thinking about the $3 million that's over there. Just curious if there's any status update.
There is no new status update. The only thing I would say is we still have the $3 million that you all approved set aside, and at some point we'll need to make a decision about how long we continue to set that aside, but nothing from the developer.
All right. Next, Mr. Driggs, followed by Ms. Ajmira.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to notice first that I think these private donations of land are a wonderful new dimension, along with our private partnership on the trust fund and the people who have helped fund that. So we are leveraging taxpayer dollars. I appreciate the efficiency of that use of funds. I did want to note, well, for one, I had a question. When we make these land contributions, do we have a typical kind of tax credit structure for multifamily units? And if so, do we count this as if it had been a cash trust fund contribution, or how does the deal get put together when one of the pieces is city donated land?
Right. So you've what we did most recently, Mr. Driggs, and tell me if I'm not directly answering your question or if we need to talk a little more about this offline, is so there were two different scenarios. We have entered into long-term leases, right, for the land, so for a nominal amount, right? And we have also granted, in some cases, a housing trust fund allocation as well. So in some cases, you've done both. And at least one case I can remember, or maybe two cases, the developer didn't need any additional trust fund money. They just needed the conveyance of the land. They raised kind of private equity and some other dollars to make the deal work. So each one of these is unique, and thank you for raising that. There's not a one size fits all, and a lot of it depends on what's developed there, right? And so obviously if you have more density, multifamily, you have more units to spread the cost over, so that kind of helps bring the economics of the deal down or make them more manageable, as opposed to if you have fewer units, sometimes it doesn't work that well. So I'm not sure if I'm answering you directly or not, or if I'm helping you.
I guess a different way to put it is, I'd like to see a kind of unified cost per door type of calculation,
Sure.
taking into account the land and any,
Yes.
so that we don't have any obscurity about what the actual city contribution is.
I understand, Mr. Driggs. And so when we've done this before, we have done that for you, right? And so if it was just the land, we calculated the per door based on just the land, everything that you put in it. So I get your point. You want the value of the land and the trust fund value to be calculated to produce the per door.
For comparison
That's
purposes,
right.
and also based to measure the use of cash.
That's right.
If there is any, in addition to the land value.
Sure.
And the other thing, I think maybe a question actually for the manager. Normally, the city's policy is if we divest assets, we're supposed to sell them and put the proceeds back into the general fund. That's the rule, right? So in this case, we are doing in-kind funding. Given my own feeling that right now our trust fund commitment for housing is large at the expense of what I consider to be some urgent priorities, particularly given the 2040 plan, would it make sense to notionally purchase the land from trust fund dollars, put those into the general fund when we're offering the land? In other words, are we going to offer this land in addition to $50 million in bond commitments, or are we going to use some of that $50 million to fund the donation of the land?
So, Councilmember Driggs, if I understand your question, I think I go back to what Pam said. There will be different scenarios based on what we get from the RFP. I like Little Rock. Little Rock, what did we do with that one, Pam?
I believe, and this is testimony, we did both. We did a trust fund I think it was a trust fund and the land. And so in some cases, and manager, I want to be, so in some cases, it's the trust fund and it's the land, right? So in some cases, this could be in addition to Mr. Driggs. I want to be clear about that.
Right. So I just want to make the general point. We'll look at transaction structures when you offer them. But I just want to make the suggestion, there is a case that we have assigned $50 million for affordable housing. If we want to contribute land that could otherwise be sold for cash, then we could take some of the trust fund money that we had already devoted to housing and put it into the general fund to meet these other needs, which in my view are right now being shortchanged a little bit in favor of our housing priority. This is the third cycle. I mean, I'm guessing that we'll probably pass a budget tonight. You know, you never can tell. But yeah, right. But you see my point. I think once we make that $50 million commitment, that is kind of the amount that we're committing. And to the extent that we do in-kind donations, then that could actually be a notional land purchase by the trust fund in order to put some money back in the general fund, rather than run our total up to $60 million of housing. Because there's about $10 million, including the privately donated, in the transactions that we've just been told about.
Right.
So I'm just concerned that we have a whole bunch of other general fund needs that we're going to be stretched to meet as we take on the challenges of the 2040 plan.
Yep. I would just like to talk to the team about that, and the legal team, as to what we can do with that trust fund. Because it's really capacity. So let me.
But we do also have a policy that divestiture of assets should be at market value and that the proceeds should be put into the general fund. So there's a case like that to be made. And we can discuss it further, but I'm just putting the idea out.
Okay.
I think that Mr. Driggs does a good point, that we made that policy when we were under right sizing, and the city was very, very concerned about our financials, but it was an adopted policy that I think you could consider. The only exception I would think is that if someone, and I'm not a lawyer either, so Mr. Baker, I guess if someone said to us, we're donating this land for affordable housing, which are the two largest parcels or two of the largest, that we certainly need to respect the wishes of
I
those
wouldn't
families.
include that, Mayor.
So,
I get that. I wouldn't
yeah.
include that.
And
If
so
we have
I
a-
do think that the policy debate about, at the time, I mean, that policy was around right sizing and a lot of other things that we put it in, and I don't know how old it seems like a long time ago, but I don't know. I think we should actually look at that policy and make a decision about it. I think Mr. Drakes makes a great point.
So I think that would be like a restricted asset for a nonprofit that donated land, and there's no question about the use of that land. It wouldn't, what I'm talking about really has to do more with just city property that was
Yeah.
on our books, and we've now decided we don't need. Thank you.
I understand. And at least we got rid of the land swap with the county, because that was really a useless, I'm sorry. That was without scrutiny or impossibility. All right, Ms. Ajmira? Mr. Newton has joined us. I don't see you here, Mr. Newton. Ms. Ajmira?
Good to be here.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Really, I'm certainly very impressed with just the overall presentation, Ms. Whiteman. It's just great to see not just the public-private partnership, but also collaboration within our city departments that tackles affordable housing crisis that our city is facing. So the housing division, the real estate division, general services, all working together to tackle affordable housing. I think that is truly remarkable. Certainly, I think you have gone a step further in identifying some of the barriers, especially around rezoning, where it's a city-led effort. And I have heard that from some of the developers where they do want to do development. However, the rezoning process certainly adds cost to the overall development, and also it adds time. So it's certainly great to see that you're removing some of these barriers, and hopefully that results in increased proposals that we will see as a result of the RFP process. Certainly it's great to also see the timeline. So overall, I just want to thank Ms. Weidman, to you, Real Estate Division and General Services for this vision and really helping us move forward with our affordable housing goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ajmira. Thank you, Ms. Ajmira. We have Mr. Winston, followed by Ms. Johnson.
I have mine. Thank you, Ms. Winston.
I still got you there. It's just,
Oh, yes.
I could have gone around the room
Oh, yeah.
practically, but this is the way it turns out. Mr. Winston, followed by Ms. Johnson.
One comment and one question. I think this is great. I hope that we can think about a land acquisition kind of approach as well that matches this disposition, so that our portfolio is continuing to cycle through, so that we have a policy-based approach to this, because I think we all know that it's necessary. I will push back on one thing that you said about home ownership, the idea that you have to sell the land, and that is the tie-in to the creation of generational wealth. The other option would be, and this is something we've talked about, is using the land trust model to keep those land costs down while still providing the vehicle for that homeowner to build wealth over time should they decide to sell. This is something that we've talked about from City Council since I've been on council on day one. What is the status update, or what is the possibility, or how do we go down a policy pathway to look at creating a citywide and or municipal land trust so that we can lock in the affordability of these lands permanently and still have the ability to build generational wealth for those potential homeowners.
Yeah. So, Mr. Winston, thank you for that question, and you are absolutely correct in terms of the land trust model being a way that we can still build wealth and acquire land. What I would say to you is I don't have an answer for what it would take today to create a municipal land trust. What I will say, and I know you don't mean, I know, I totally get where you're going. So give us some time to continue to work and to continue to think through that. What I am aware of is that one of the most successful ones kind of in our region is, I believe it was in Orange County. And I think there is one in Atlanta. But we, not, no, but. So that's that. And we continue to work with the West Side Land Trust to help with that model as well. But let us do some more study on what a municipal land trust model would look like. But I hear your point, and that's very well taken. You're correct.
Ms. Johnson?
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. I also want to thank Pam and Brent for the presentation. This is exciting. But I also had some questions about the ownership of the land. I want to back off what Councilmember Winston stated as far as the city maintaining ownership of the land into perpetuity, like what the West Side Land Trust does. It's a way to maintain some sense of affordability, especially when we know what land values are doing and how they're increasing in this market. So on that, I'm trying to understand from a developer perspective. There's an RFP, and we're saying submit a proposal and people to reduce the cost. Is that how that's going to work?
So, Ms. Johnson, you broke up a little bit. You said there's an RFP, and we didn't hear anything you said after that.
How's this process going to work? How is this equitable?
Yeah, so in terms of, I think you said, how's the process going to work? And so let me take you to, if you'll go to that last slide for me, Wendy, in terms of next steps. And so on the land trust model, let me try to put a finer point on that as well. Again, we don't dismiss that. We know that that is a strategy out there. What we're trying to do is kind of respond to multiple things, right? We have these parcels, we've had them for a while, we hear the feedback about what are we doing. So we're trying to do as much as we can now and continue to kind of study other models that might be viable to add to our toolbox. So we're not dismissing that. In terms of kind of how the process will work. And so I'll go back to this slide, and I'll just go so October, November, you're going to have we hope you'll have some rezoning decisions rendered around the 2 parcels that we have in the rezoning. We're going to publish the city-owned land RFP. Between the months of November and February. We're going to review those. We're going to work to select a developer based on what we believe to be the best proposals are, juxtaposed against kind of what your city goals are. Ms. Watlington mentioned place types. So we're going to be doing all of that stuff. We're going to be doing contract negotiations, our site conveyance, and then getting those acquisition contracts in place. And then between the months of January and February, we're going to publish the Housing Trust Fund RFP. Again, that allows for developers not only to utilize land, but to utilize your housing trust fund should they need to. And then, like you normally do in April and in May during that time frame, you'll be seeing all of the proposals, these including city-owned land and others that might be out there as well. And then you'll make your housing trust fund allocations and your land conveyance. What we're trying to do is have it as streamlined as a process as we can so that we can come back to you, we can minimize the trips that we have to make back and forth to the council about this same topic. So, and also we're trying to be as consistent and streamlined as we can for the development community as well, having heard their feedback.
Oh, thank you, and I appreciate the timeline. But what I'm considering is all of the priorities that the council has. We have equitable considerations, affordability, and affordable housing. So when I think of all of that, I ask myself, if I'm a small developer and I want to submit an RFP and I'm competing against a large established developers.
Ms. Johnson, can you come into your mic a little bit? You're breaking up a little bit. Want to make sure you're heard.
Yes. How does this, I'm just trying to understand the ownership of the land. If I'm a small developer and I want to submit an RFP, respond to the RFP, and I'm competing against a large developer, it feels like if the land is being donated to the developer, that just builds more wealth for the wealthier developer. So I want to know, well, I'm sorry. So if what I'm saying and what Councilmember Winston's saying, if we maintain ownership of the land, we're not increasing wealth unfairly for any developer, because if we're giving them that loan, that land, that just increases their wealth and their value. I think my thought is the way to maintain more of an affordable project is to maintain ownership of the land without going through the process of a municipal land trust. That could just be part of the RFP, that they can compete for this project, but that the city will maintain ownership of the land. And I just think of that and I don't know what the competitive or what the requirements will be for these RFPs, but I really want to think about the small developer, how they're competing against a very large developer, and then we as the city are taking publicly owned and donated land to give to the developers. And again, it just feels like, the rich just getting richer. So I want to make sure that we're considering this from an equitable perspective. I also wanted to ask what is meant by mixed use components. Is that affordable housing and market rate, or affordable housing and retail, or what are we thinking on mixed use components?
So thank you, Councilmember Johnson. It's good to see you. I guess the best way to answer your first question is, as we've been doing this, trying to get units built, whether they're multifamily or single family, with some of the tools that have been in the toolbox, the cost of the land has been something that has been a detriment to getting the units built. So one of the concepts is from not the donated land, let's just start with city-owned land. Could we help get more units built by throwing the land into the deal? But it doesn't mean that we would start off with that. Is that correct, Pam?
That is correct, and we're not giving the land, we're leasing the land. So we're doing long-term leases, so the city will always own the land, but we have to do a long-term lease, generally 50 years, at least 50 years, so that the developers can get the proper financing to actually build the developments. But we don't give it, we lease it to the developers.
I also wanted to say, when two developers come in, no matter what the size, the value of the land is constant between the two developments. They're not
That's right.
unequal. The value of the land is just the value of the land,
Correct.
I believe. But I also, Ms. Johnson, wanted to make sure you had, does that answer your first question? Because you had a second one on mixed-use components. We can't hear you, Ms. Johnson.
For sale projects, Pam,
So
lease the land, or you said earlier that they were going to transfer the land to the owner. So wouldn't that go through the developer?
So I'll use the Vantage Point example that we did most recently that you all approved. And so that was a conveyance of the land, right? And so we conveyed it to the developers. And we did it in that case in the absence of a municipal land trust. so that they could develop a for sale product. But it's like a balance thing, Ms. Johnson, in that case. So we gave them the land, right? And again, think about it, we're monetizing our assets, or we're trying to further leverage. So in that case, if we can give the land, that brings down the trust fund ask that they have to ask the city council to actually build, that lowers the funding request. So just as an example, so if a developer were going to ask you, and this is a real basic example, just for to illustrate it, if a developer were going to ask you, say, for $2 million to build a development, if we gave the land in that case rather than $2 million, that could bring it down so that they only had to ask you for $1 million in funding and $1 million in the land. So that's just an example of how that helps you further leverage and monetize an asset. Again, in the absence of a municipal land trust, we hear that concept is a tool that we need to add to our toolbox.
We can talk more offline, because I want to think about this from an equitable perspective. I understand the land cost is fixed, but the land growth or the increase is an asset for the owner. So what I'm saying is if in the RFP, if we look at this, can a small developer compete with a larger developer if we are planning to convey land to that developer?
Yeah. Yeah, and Ms. Johnson, I look forward to the conversation offline. I think the short answer is they can, and one of the ways is if we're doing this early on, right? And so I'm sure people are watching. We are always willing to help talk to the smaller developers to create that level, that equal playing field. And the other thing that I think about too, we think about creating equity. The developer in the for sale case, they're going to sell it to a family to create affordable home ownership. So I think about creating equity for that affordable household who's actually going to purchase the house and start that generational wealth building. But I'd be delighted to talk with you more offline about it.
Yeah, I'd love to, because one of the values you said for the land was $2.5 million. So again, I know that there's a way that we can help with affordable housing, help with home ownership, and also equitable considerations for developers and upward mobility. And then my last question was, what are we considering the mixed use component? Is that
sure
affordable market rate or affordable and retail?
So mixed income, it was where you have affordable housing and market rate housing. So that's mixed income housing. Mixed use is where you have a different types of uses, right? And so you might have affordable and a housing use, right? And then you may also have a retail use, for example, or another use. So the different mixed income is different housing, but different household AMIs. Mix of uses is different uses within a development.
That's awesome. So if there are going to be retail or commercial space, can we look at affordable office space or affordable retail space on this land for small businesses? And
yeah,
that was something else I would want to consider.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Graham, followed by Mr. Phipps. I think that would be everyone on the council understands. Mr. Newton, would you like to say anything? Okay.
Mr. Newton,
All right, Mr. Graham.
I'll be short as well. One, I think Mr. Winston already spoke about adding land acquisition as a part of this equation. Councilmember Ashmere took my notes and talked about the importance of collaboration internally in terms of what we're doing. I think that's really important in terms of the good job that the staff is doing. I like the schedule. I think the schedule is aggressive and obtainable. And I've already spoken with the city manager in reference to what I think we need to add to it. So I'll let him and the staff kind of work that out together. Just want to make one comment, though. $50 million is just not enough. Right? We got backloads of housing that we have to build in this community, and $50 million sounds like a lot of money, but it is not. And from my perspective, we ought to find ways to do even more. So I'll leave that point there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a question about, did I understand you to say that one of the property acquisitions were circa 92 or 93?
Yes, sir. I forget exactly which one that was. I should know this by heart now.
I was just curious as to, why is it taking so long for us to try to, to use those properties in a way that that we want to use them in terms of affordable housing? I mean, you're talking, 28 years ago or something? I mean, I know we've had discussions about, city-owned land and affordable housing and conversations in prior years. So I was just wondering, why is it taking so long to get to this point with that particular parcel?
Yeah, so Mr. Phipps, and I'll double check to make sure that what I'm saying is 100% accurate, but I'll say it's two things. One, it's the collaboration that you see now, right? And so it's working with planning, it's working with general services to make sure that we understand, in some instances there could have been a proposed city use, but that is no longer the proposed city use for it, right? And for Newland in particular, I believe that one had been put out in an RFP previously, but that we did not get any takers on it. So it does not represent the first time that it's been put out. But we don't stop there. We want to put it out again because we know that particularly that area off the Beatties Ford Road corridor is gentrifying. We know that a lot has changed there. So I don't want you to hear that these are the first time that we put these properties out. But what I would love for you to hear is that we didn't stop, that we're going to do it again and again until we get something. So that's what I would hope you hear, is the collaboration, and that we try and we try again.
Thanks. Excellent work as always. You guys crush it every time you give us an update. I would just say that this is not something, though, that money is going to solve. This is a $1 billion issue just to tread water and stay where we are without losing ground. And right now, just to be clear, we're losing ground. So I think now you and I have talked about this many times. You know exactly what I'm going to say. Just to keep it on everyone's radar, now's the time to work smarter, not harder, and figure out ways to innovate to make the dollars go more, because we don't have $1 billion to throw at this, and that doesn't even get us ahead of the curve. So we got to start thinking differently. Thank you.
And Mr. Bakari, I will say two things, and then I think you guys have probably heard from me enough. One is that so we know that we have to keep doing it, right? And so you've seen this timeline. We're going to release a summer RFP if the manager is okay and the mayor, that where we wouldn't do our normal kind of 4% tax credit or see what we get, right? And then you'll see these coming back to you at the timeline we prescribed. And the other thing, Mr. Bakari, thank you, the work that is being done with our workforce, I forget what we call it, but with our jobs plan or whatever, if you've ever heard me talk, I say affordable housing, we have to get people in good paying jobs, right, so that they can sustain the affordable housing that they obtain. And so this is a piece of the puzzle. We know that jobs is absolutely important to help them sustain. So thank you for always keeping me honest and on task with that.
Banking industry, our jobs growth, and people that are recognizing this is an issue. And I think that's due to the work of this council. You know, if we were just keeping it in the closet and not really actually dealing with it, I think that we would be doing a lot less. And I think this council has stepped up and made a huge difference in making this a community issue and making that recognition of good paying jobs, a decent place to live, and soon we'll get to a place and an easy way to get to work and home. That's what makes a family work, and I just hope that we continue to talk about this what's necessary for people to be successful and have opportunity in our city. I hope that we'll continue to work as a council and a group to say this is what makes a difference in Charlotte for quality of life. So thank you once again. I don't know if we're not going to applaud you because I think we did that already. So we'll just say thank you very much. Oh, we're going to applaud you. Okay, the next item on the agenda, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. So we have two updates dealing with our municipal service districts. So annually, we have Michael and Darlene come before the council. So we'll start off with Michael Smith, who's the president and CEO of Charlotte Center City Partners. Good to see you.
Mayor, Council, Mr. Jones, a pleasure to be with you all. Thanks for this opportunity. We'll share some incredible results on what is possible through this public-private partnership. Together, we are building one of the great cities of the world and a place that I really believe is well positioned to thrive post-pandemic. Our organization is structured as a 501c4. It's a nonprofit. And what we do is we envision and activate strategies and actions that will assure that our center city is welcoming and equitable, economically vibrant, culturally rich, and a beloved place for all. We lead with economic development research. If you can go back one slide. Thank you. We lead with research and urban planning, economic development, community development, with marketing and storytelling, with programming and events and more. We also operate Charlotte Joy Rides, which is a docked, not-for-profit, mission-based bike share program that we do in partnership with the city. And we also operate the 7th Street Public Market, which has been a really effective small business incubator and a food hall. We also operate the Center City Ambassador Program, which puts uniformed ambassadors that are trained personnel on the street, and they lead with hospitality, but they also partner with our homeless service agencies to be kind of first responders on the street, and they also serve as eyes and ears for CMPD. So that was really helpful for us during the pandemic. Next slide, please. We are committed to building an equitable and just center city, and we continue to work towards that aspiration. We acknowledge that our urban core has fostered inequity, injustice, and exclusion. There has been unjust policies that have destroyed neighborhoods and reduced access to opportunity, particularly people of color. Yet, despite the most prolific decade of Center City growth, disparities grew during this last decade. And we're committed to being a part of equitable economic development and community development, and we recognize there's much to do. Next slide, please. So we operate 4 municipal service districts in partnership with the city. The first 3 are inside the footprint of Uptown. The next slide, there is some that is also in Midtown, including around the CPCC campus. And then next slide is MSD 4, which is our south end. Next slide, please. We work hard to engage our stakeholders prior to creating the budget that we share with you and incorporating their input into our program of work. We have robust public input into the 2040 plan, and that allows us to respond to our stakeholders' voice in both the South End and in the North Tryon plans. Our directors also attend our neighborhood associations. We use other techniques, including newsletters and social media and traditional media, reaching out to our neighbors. We use blogs and websites, primary research, including surveys and focus groups. All this to build a program of work and a budget that we share with you. Next slide, please. It is important to acknowledge the incredibly hard year that all downtowns have had, all cities have had, and it's been particularly tough on ours during COVID. This has been a difficult time for so many small businesses, entrepreneurs, and frontline workers. Thank you to the city for the way that you stepped up. It made such a difference to so many of our stakeholders. And I bring from them to you, thank you. Thank you for that leadership. Now we find ourselves in this dramatic period of transition. Cities are restarting their engines concurrently. And the point on that is that matches us up against so many of our competitors. And what it does is it gives us an opportunity to change leagues again. And it comes down to the quality of our ideas and the quality of our execution. I look forward to working with all of you in response to that. Next slide, please. So we have great confidence in our center city and its ability to respond, growing jobs, investment, and attracting talent. And that confidence begins with the challenge, what happened before we entered this challenging period. We had our most prolific decade of growth. And it was not just the buildings that were built, which is great because it expands the tax base, but that's infrastructure for economic development. Think about the space. It was 9.7 million square feet of new office. That's just over 48,000 positions for employees. We grew 61 shops and restaurants. Think of all the people that will work and shop there. We almost doubled our hotel rooms, and that's 1.1 million additional overnight guests to our city, to our center city. What I love about hotel guests, too, is you don't expand police stations, you don't build new classrooms. They come, they spend money, they leave it here. It supports jobs. And then lastly, we added space for another 20,540 new residents. So next slide, please. From an economic development standpoint, our team remains so committed to job growth. It is the lifeblood of our community, and this is our central business district. We're so thrilled by the partnership that we enjoy with the city and the leadership that you guys enjoy with Tracy Dotson and her team. Our center city subject matter experts, we partner also with the counties, the states, the alliance, and then, of course, the brokerage community are a really important partner of ours in the work that we're doing to continue to grow jobs, because the reason our community is building 9.7 million square feet of office is because of that pairing of incredible talent and just new jobs coming to our community, and they know that they'll be able to fill the space. We lead this effort on our side by providing good research and data and public policy to support our partnership, and we're doing that constantly with your team. It's analysis, it's deploying our team's strengths around marketing, communications, kind of owning the master narrative and the depth of understanding of Uptown and South End. We continue to implement these strategies to foster street-level retail. And during the pandemic, we began an effort called the Small Business Innovation Fund. This fund granted 116 small businesses innovation money. So not money that could be used just to keep the doors open, but how are you going to improve your business to be able to thrive through this troubling time and then be stronger on the backside. We had great partnerships. That Honeywell was our lead investor. We had other incredible partners. And thank you to the city for your investment in one of those rounds. We had a dedicated round that was citywide. And what we found with the private dollars is we were able to put preferences on it. And those preferences were MWBE businesses, veteran-owned businesses. And I thought, well, what if we could do 30, 40%? Almost 90% of the businesses that received the grants fell into one of those three categories. So we were thrilled by the results there. Next slide, please. Planning and development. We have fulfilled much of the vision of the 2020 vision plan, and we will be bringing to you shortly the 2040 Center City Vision Plan, the all-in plan. We've loved our partnership with the planning department, with Taiwo and with Grant and others. In addition to this, we are working on some important visioning work. Our team continues the implementation of the North Tryon Vision Plan for 50 square blocks north of Trade and Tryon. A lot of opportunity for redevelopment very intentionally. Our team is in regular conversation with the private sector and the planning department as we work together shaping this urban core. Next slide, please. From a community development standpoint, Great urban centers are really expressed through the quality of their neighborhoods. We remain fully committed to having a center city that is affordable and inclusive. I love that conversation you just had. It's going to take so much innovation, and there was big thinking that was shared in this room. Thank you for that leadership. You'll see the commitment reflected in our program of work and in recommendations in the 2040 plan, commitments to inclusivity and affordability. Our community development team is working closely within Uptown and South End communities, championing things like the rail trail, which we worked so closely with the city in its continued development. And then finally, our Center City Ambassador program, which we expanded to the South End this year. We ran a pilot program. It was very successful, and we were glad to add that. Next slide, please. From a marketing communications standpoint, we learned a lot during COVID, just the power of different forms of marketing, different forms of communication. And it's about owning that narrative and inviting people back. There'll be a big focus across the summer about powering up Uptown, just trying to get people back. It's what our major employers want, is inviting their employees back even before they're back in full force. During the pandemic, we really did double down with programming and storytelling about our Center City. Next slide, please. So from a programming and event standpoint, this continues to be the hub of hospitality in our community, and we are so eager to see that return with that energy and excitement of events and hospitality and entertainment. Our programming and events highlight the city's cultural arts, and we are beginning to see that activity back, and it's thrilling to see our hotels with strong occupancy on weekends, strong average daily rates returning. It's the weekday where we still have softness, but that will pair with as employees return to the office. Charlotte Shout, we're so excited to be bringing that back this fall. It will be the last 3 weekends and 2 weeks of September. It is a partnership between us and the Blumenthal Performing Arts. We're thrilled to be working with the city and with the county, and we've got incredible private sector sponsorship that we can share more about shortly. CLT New Year's Eve, this is our 75th anniversary of the Novant Health Thanksgiving Day Parade. We've got a little fun twist to it this year. We're going to move it to the eve, make it an evening parade, so more to come on that. And then throughout the year, we enjoy working so closely with the CRVA on things like President's Cup and that great, successful NBA All-Star game. And I'll remind you that we manage the Tryon Street Mall. Next slide, please. From a mobility standpoint, thank you for the leadership that the city is providing on the front of mobility. It is making such a difference in the way we compete for jobs. It is the first thing that we want to talk about and that people want to know about. We're punching way above our weight in that regard. We love our partnership with John Lewis and his team. Thank you for the partnership also with CDOT. We were able to relaunch Charlotte B-Cycle, now Charlotte Joy Rides, with 343 e-assist bikes. There was a great federal grant that was applied to bring those bikes to our city. And we continue to enjoy working with your engineering team on the design of the pedestrian bridge connecting the rail trail into Uptown. From a special initiative standpoint, next slide, please. Our team's working on a number of initiatives, one of which has been mentioned tonight a couple times, and that's that commitment to an enduring strategy for homelessness in our community. Thank you to so many of your team that are working on that. We were able to bring some great leadership around the table. We're not the experts. We're bringing the experts to the table. And thank you, Councilman Graham, for serving on that leadership committee. We look forward to the recommendations that will come back. If you bump into leadership from McKinsey, please thank them for how generous they've been with their time and their expertise with this engagement. Music Everywhere has been an important initiative for us, particularly during COVID, where we were able to raise some money, be able to help artists and help venues. Thank you for the leadership that you guys provided on the venue relief. And 7th Street Public Market continues to be super important for us. Next slide, please. So this is our budget for FY21. You guys have gotten all the details on this. Next slide is our budget for FY22. And I'm glad to answer any questions.
Has a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks for the presentation, Michael. Lots going on. It'll be exciting to really see life come back into Uptown. Two questions I have. What's the timing on the rail trail pedestrian bridge? And then the second is, I know it's not under your management, but what's the future of the Epicenter property, if you have any information on that? Thank you.
You're welcome. Pardon the pace that I delivered that. I was trying to get a little time back for you guys. So the question about the pedestrian bridge, it is kind of one-year design. We are at about 75% design right now, so we continue to make good progress there. I feel like we are going to deliver a product that is one of a kind and is something that our community is really going to be proud of. And we were able to maintain that functionality of great width so that we can be really effective with that bike-ped connection. I'm doing this by memory. I think it's late 23 is when we will cut the ribbon on it. So it's a couple years of construction as well. And I'd love to talk with you offline about the Epicenter.
That's not good.
I think you're going to have to talk to 11 people offline about the Epicenter after that comment. So,
that's fine, just not through this.
right. Mr. Bakari?
Thanks. Yeah, you guys are doing great work, obviously. One of my main questions was going to be the Epicenter. I'm sensing we'd like to talk about that offline. I will obviously do that, but just note that that is so critical for us to figure out. I mean, it is literally the heart of re-jump starting the circulatory system for Uptown. So heavy emphasis there. There are other things that are on the top of my mind. The small businesses in your MSDs, the hospitality and tourism, the hotels, the crime rates. I think those are all kind of things that must be top priority for us. But the one thing I'll ask you to comment on right now that I think is an issue that we've grappled with, there's been a lot of work, but I don't think we've done it effectively, is homelessness in that area. And I think the punchline is we have a lot of resources to help with this. We have a system to enter in. Somehow the people out there in large parts aren't making it into the system. And I think we need a heavier dose of tough love amongst this community, especially amongst those who continually give money and food and clothing directly to these folks instead of giving them to the organizations that are designed to help them with their issues, be it mental health, be it upward mobility, or many other things. So, you know, you've been at this for a while. Is there going to be a strategy that, you know, isn't kid gloves to approach this at some point because it's getting worse and worse and worse?
So I'll answer the first one first because there was a comment about small business that I wanted to offer some great news about. So we were hoping we could do one more round of the Small Business Innovation Fund that's been so effective. And we went back to our partners and they returned, and we're going to be able to do another almost $1 million round across the summer. And these are generally like $25,000 to $35,000 investments in innovation and small business. And it's fun riding around with our team that's been a part of these evaluations, and they just keep pointing to things that have been accomplished because that money got into the hands of these, you know, really innovative entrepreneurs. So we're excited about that. The question about homelessness, I agree that this is something that we have to get ahead of as a community. We've watched what's happened to our neighbors on the West Coast and the almost insurmountable crisis that they're in. I'm thrilled with the group that has come together that's being chaired by Kathy Besant and by Gene Woods. Believe it or not, we now have north of 140 organizations that are a part of this, working in 9 different work streams. And it's well over 200 experts, and these are great leaders, lots of groups chairing different initiatives. There's, I think it's 5 what are we going to do's and 4 how are we going to do them, and they're each, really well staffed with really smart people. And it's a 5-year look. This fall we will bring to you a strategic plan. The mayor has asked that we bring that to you guys for consideration for adoption. But we share your passion and your commitment for addressing it.
If I can just make one ask of you guys as you craft that strategic plan, let's think out of the box and boldly, because we've done a lot of things these last several years, and while a lot of good individual outcomes have occurred, we haven't made a dent in the broader issue. So, thinking outside of the box and saying, if people aren't getting it and they're still bringing food and money and clothing and resources directly to folks that are out there right now, they're only making themselves feel good. They're hurting the ultimate folks. Perhaps we explore making that a misdemeanor. We have to do something different, or we're never going to get ahead of it. So my ask would be if you guys in that plan could put a couple bold steps in there for consideration.
We're fully committed to that. Gene and Kathy would have it no other way.
Thank you.
I think, did any other council members have a question? I'm sorry, Mr. Phipps, yes. Sorry, I didn't see your hand up. And Ms. Ajmir follows Mr. Phipps.
Yeah. I can recall back in 2005 when Mr. Wolf was standing right there in that podium where you are, where he presented a 10-year plan to eliminate homelessness. But it's a vexing issue, and here we are still battling that issue. But another question that I have that would probably be, we probably need to talk offline about it, is how are you planning to how are you planning for the post-pandemic changes in office worker patterns that will likely include more flexible work alternatives that will have less of a need for office space going forward? I know we had some companies uptown even making some transitions to smaller office space, moving from uptown to maybe South End. So have you all given consideration to that, or are we just overly optimistic that things are going to return back to full blast office workers uptown in high-rise buildings?
So this is one of the most shaping events of our generation, maybe the most. And it will definitely have an impact on the way office space is used. What is not determined is how it will, and I think it will be different with every employer. We've seen employers taking more space at first because they were considering personal space, but look at how quickly that changed. The number of companies who have reduced their footprint is a very small amount, and some efficiency to put more space back on the market is not a bad thing, because for us and how well we do in economic development and recruiting, you can either create space through efficiency or development. And some efficiency, like we just saw with Duke, is not a bad thing. That Duke Energy Tower is a prized jewel, and Wells will either be able to expand there organically, which we would love, or it will be more space for Tracy and her team, complemented by us, to be able to market and bring more jobs here.
Do you think there might be an opportunity for some consideration be given to transitioning some of the office space to maybe residential space?
Yes, I think there could be some of that. We had a little bit of that at 230 South Tryon, which was the old Mass Mutual building. And it was a time where pre-2008, so pre-Great Recession, where condos were so hot. And that's been a really good property. One of the things that we did find through the pandemic and through a lot of our research with the 2040 plan is we need more center city housing. Even with as much as we've put in place, We need more density. We need more housing. It'll be more people walking to work. We need to do it with affordability in mind, and we're going to need new tools to be able to do that. It's incredibly hard to do it on our most expensive land, but we want to have a place that has that kind of diversity of folks. Otherwise, it's going to be a really boring place. I don't know how else to put it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Phipps. Ms. Ajmira?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Some of my questions were asked by my colleagues, so I wouldn't repeat those questions, but I think also I share the concerns that my colleagues have raised about Epicenter, and I do look forward to having a conversation with you, Michael, about the future of Epicenter. I appreciate the work that your Center City partner has done, especially during the pandemic, and really getting the relief out there to small businesses, because we know that our uptown businesses have struggled the most, and especially our hospitality industry. I hear from a lot of folks in hospitality sector, there is a paradigm shift in terms of business travel, and also with this hybrid concept of working from home and working remote. How are we positioned, Michael, to weather that?
Thank you for that question. I'm not ready to concede that we are going to have this super light population in our center city. I think it will return. It's not going to return as dramatically as it left. There will be a curve to this. And some of it will be people taking less space and it being released. The market will be efficient. That's one thing we can always count on. And I think it is fascinating that a place that is so renowned for big business, all of a sudden we really gained a great understanding of it's having 120,000 people coming there every day pre-pandemic, and the amount of small business opportunity that created, and all those great businesses that make that up. And it is the personality of our uptown. And we're going to have to really pay attention to them, particularly as we're on this curve of return to office, because it will still, they all dug deep and went deep into their savings and probably into credit lines in order to sustain. And we had a lot of heroes, a lot of small business heroes that made it through this.
So to follow up on that, Michael, it's great that we are hopeful when it comes to our real estate space in Uptown, but I guess I'm trying to figure out, as I hear this from hotel and motel owners, especially who own businesses in Uptown area, where they have seen the business travel dramatically get affected, significantly.
Yes.
And I see in your budget, I was looking at some of the initiatives that Center City Partners is investing in to bring back some of that travel, but is it realistic to really expect the same business travel that we have seen before pandemic? And if not, how are we going to really position our downtown hospitality business that truly rely on business travel?
The return of business travel, it will follow the return to work from office. And it's been predicted that there will be significantly less business travel. I think there's been a lot of efficiencies that have been discovered, particularly by our consultative businesses. whether that's accounting or strategy or financial consulting. And it will have an impact. And we're going to have to continue to monitor and work with our hotels. It is very encouraging how well they've recovered for weekend travel already. It has been a good May, good beginning to June. And it's something we're going to have to work on together.
Ms. Ashmira, did you have, oh, you're done. All right. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for the presentation. I just had, and I'm sorry, Max is barking in the background, but I just had one comment that I wanted to address that, possibly implementing a plan where helping homeless individuals could be a misdemeanor, and I know you didn't say that, Michael, but I just didn't want to leave that hanging from this council, that would be the headline tomorrow. That's something that I would never support, especially when there's so many systemic barriers for individuals who are homeless. We know that North Carolina Medicaid's not expanded. Many of those individuals aren't getting the health care that they need. I'm a brain injury advocate, so, data shows that 1 in 2 individuals who are homeless have a brain injury. We know there are veterans out there. It's my understanding when are released from jail and they're homeless, they're dropped off downtown or uptown. So there are bigger barriers that, Center City Partners cannot address alone. They're doing a great job. And I'd love to talk to you about your group, Michael, offline, as well as about the Epicenter. But I just didn't want to leave that comment hanging that, make it a misdemeanor to help individuals who are homeless, because everyone needs a little help sometimes. Thanks.
All right, that's our last person to speak. I'm going to ask Darlene and Michael to do this. In your districts, what would you say your top 5 vulnerabilities are, particularly around physical location and space? I think that would be helpful. These are the kinds of things the council wants to be aware of, and to have that information and a little bit of an understanding. And I just think that you have that on the ground knowledge that we don't get. And we were talking today about trying to make sure we communicate more often. And if you could just do something like that, that would give us a starting point, both of you. And so with that, thank you, Michael. And now, Ms. Gator.
And with regard to space, you're talking about commercial office space?
Well, I think your retail and commercial are what we're really thinking about, or it could be abandoned spaces. I think that there are things that okay, Mr. Eggleston said you can give 5 challenges and 5 opportunities. Okay, thank you. All right, good to see you. I just got a chance to go out to the new Marriott.
Good.
Very nice.
It's beautiful,
nice.
Isn't it? The art is just amazing there.
It is.
It's quite a story. So good evening, Council, City Manager, Mayor. I'm Darlene Heater. I'm the Executive Director at University City Partners. We manage MSD 5, which is an MSD that is anchored by UNC Charlotte. It's 8 miles from Center City, and we have a rather large MSD. Our MSD is 5 square miles. So if you look at this map, you can see the size, well, Councilmember Johnson's picture is kind of over part of it, but the size of University City Partners MSD when you compare it to Uptown. Our mission is like Charlotte Center City Partners. We do the same work. We build and sustain the economic vitality for University City. Next slide. Our FY 2021 resource investment is as depicted on this slide. We invested MSD revenue as well as private dollars to support economic development, planning and development, events and programming, and marketing and communication. And then we also have a sister organization that we run, the University City Foundation. And the foundation also supports events, small grassroots organizations and their program and community needs, as well as small local nonprofits through grants, through the issuance of grants or as a fiscal sponsor. Our University City Foundation is not bound by the MSD geography. We actually share our foundation with those neighbors around us, so we do a lot of work. As many of you know, you've heard of the U City Family Zone, and this foundation manages a lot of the grants that runs through the U City Family Zone for Hidden Valley, Newell South, and a little bit of Plaza, as well as University City. Next slide. So the light rail continues to deliver maximum value in University City. We currently have 43 parcels that are active, which is a lot when you think about 43 as a number, but if you could see the size of the parcels in University City, you would understand how dynamic that is. That, you know, our parcels are not 1 acre, 2 acre, our parcels are like 27 acres. This submarket continues to attract and grow business, and we'll talk about some of those successes. We work hard to educate students as well as lifelong learners, and to provide livable neighborhoods and to entertain visitors. Next slide. So I crafted this presentation a little differently than I did last year because so many of you don't get the opportunity to come up to University City. I have some slides just to talk about what's really happening in University and some of the successes that we can celebrate. In addition, I think our friends from the Budget Office handed out to you about a 5 or 6 page document that showcases our accomplishments, gives you greater detail on our budget investments both this past year and the budget request for this next year. So this is a picture of Centene. Centene purchased 80 acres, and then at the 9th hour, literally the 9th hour, 2 days before they were set to close, came in and bought another 50 acres across the street. So they are growing upward. As you can see, this is a picture of the office building right adjacent to it that I couldn't fit in this picture. There's another crane building the adjacent parking deck. So construction continues at a remarkable pace, and the project remains on schedule despite our soggy weather. The next slide, please. So this one is likely going to be a surprise to you, but we recently recruited a new tenant, and I say recently, we actually worked on this tenant for about 2 years, and I swear this tenant was like popcorn, that I think I showed this tenant 4 different buildings in the University Research Park. And this is one that didn't get celebrated. It came in very quietly, but in April of this year, Project Wharf, which declined incentives because they didn't want anything to hit the news waves because they're still maintaining operations in California, but they moved quietly they moved their headquarters to University City from California this spring, bringing 660 jobs. They have leased an entire building in the University Research Park, which is located right at the connection of the someday to be built North Bridge, which will connect the University Research Park through our town center to our university. So Fran is not here and Tracy is not here, but this is one that we worked on for a very long time, and they didn't get to celebrate it, and we didn't get to celebrate it either. So when you see them, tell them congratulations because they did succeed. New slide, or next slide. The principal group is one that came to the Charlotte market about 16 or 17 months ago. We are finally moving them into their office space, which is an old Allstate building that was extensively renovated. And this is a business that chose to be housed on a light rail station. And I included this slide, even though it's not this fiscal year, to remind you of the value of the investment of the light rail to University City. Next slide. This is a building these next few slides is going to talk about what's more to come in University City because we've demonstrated a lot of success. We have grown our business organically. We have recruited a lot of big companies to University City. That's what we do really good, our big businesses and big companies. But we're not done building. We have 3.5 million square feet of office space in the pipeline. So I think according to Michael's calculations, that's probably room for another 20 to 22,000 employees. Crescent Communities just completed Ascent. This is in the University Research Park. It's bringing us 164,000 square feet of leasable space through an innovative building that is very unique to University City. It's more like something you would see in South End. It marries the indoor space with the outdoor space. Next slide.
Shorenstein, the same folks who are investing in South End and who are bringing us Camp North End, purchased the old Selectron building in University City. And very soon, I was just touring this 2 weeks ago, very soon they're going to deliver 196,000 square feet of leasable space. This is adjacent to the Wells Fargo CIC and Innovation Park. And this development actually includes a 1.5 acre park that is going to be open to the public for community events. So sandwiched in between two buildings, but we're so desperate for park space that they agreed to allow community use of that space as well. Next slide. This is a rendering of the 1.5 acre park, and I say it's a design combination of what you see in Camp North End married with the green in Uptown. Next slide. EBAero is still planning to bring Water's Edge. EBAero is a development firm out of Texas. This is a build-to-suit of 200,000 square feet of office space at the J.W. Clay Station. Next slide. And then Tryon at the Park, those of you who know Jane Wu, she is the CEO of Panorama Holdings. She is offering 1 million square feet of build-to-suit office space at the University City Station. And again, this is the right in the heart of the planned entertainment district. We hope that this development will be anchored by a 5 acre public park that will be the cornerstone for this development. And again, this urban park edges the entertainment zone. Next slide. So this is a photo depicting the Marriott that is on the edge of campus. We were blessed and so fortunate to have this asset in our community now that brings not just a hotel, but a conference center. The artwork in this, as I mentioned, is just amazing. There's a Golden Owl Tavern that has brought much needed refined dining, an expansive outdoor area, and the university wanted to make sure that I mentioned their appreciation for the city support of this project. Our UNC Charlotte will now be able to host conferences and symposiums that will elevate the university's brand and their acumen. We expect to also see some tailgating at this hotel, because if you look out over the patio, you can see the football field from it. Next slide. So this one is another quiet one that came into University City, although I've done my darndest to try to make a lot of noise about it. This is a picture of the inside of the Southeast Carpentry Regional Training Center that is now in University City, and they opened in the spring. Classes are filling up. As a reminder to you, if you haven't seen or if you don't know about this facility, people can apply for this training. It does not cost them anything. It is sponsored by employers. It is a union-based training program, but those who graduate from this can make upwards of 5 to 6, what do I want to say? Thank you, figure. And in May, this is a fact I'm really super proud of because I worked really hard to build this relationship. In May, we enrolled our first 2 high school graduates from Vance High School. So big celebration there. And hallelujah, next slide. At long, long last, Topgolf has opened. Finally, opening festivities are underway. It's a remarkable facility. In fact, this Friday, they're having community day, so anybody can come in. It's free and open to the public to come in and enjoy this new asset that's in University City. So that was just a few of the highlights that we enjoyed this year through economic development. We also added 4 hotels and a boatload of housing. In fact, we have so much housing starts in University City. I think that between University City and Councilperson Watlington's district, that we are the 2 that are far and above the most starts in housing of anywhere in the city, and by a lot. So next slide. Into planning and development, this year we actually completed, finally, our University City vision plan. This vision plan is going to guide our program of work and our investments, and we're going to look forward to sharing that with you. In the fall, we're going through a very extensive vetting process with this to make sure that we got this right, to make sure, because we completed a lot of the work during the pandemic, we're taking it back out to our community to make sure we heard what they were saying and that we're focusing on the right things. We're also going to wait till our board adopts it before we bring it forward to you. Next slide. We spent a lot of time looking at our greenways, the utilization, and how to envision new ways for our greenways to support mobility and access, not just recreation. This year, we invested in a signature planning along one of our new greenways, the Barton Creek Greenway, in partnership with UNC Charlotte's Botanical Gardens. While we don't have parks in University City, like that many parks, we do have an abundance of greenways. And these are the investments we're making along our greenways are very intentional. It's part of the implementation of our vision plan. And we are working to build richer experiences to increase the utilization of this infrastructure. And I'll let you in on where we're going with this, that we believe that greenways should be considered more seriously as mobility options, that we have had conversations with Park and Rec that we want to increase the utilization of our greenways to the extent that we add a separated lane for things with wheels. Because that is how we're going to get around safely in communities like ours that have ridiculously big roads and huge highways that run through them. Next slide. We also raised private funding this year from several developments in the southwest quadrant of our MSD. This is actually Councilmember Graham's area. And the reason we raised this money was to create a location and access plan for the future Dobie Creek Greenway. So we're trying to push this forward even faster. This is where we're seeing a lot of growth in University City. And the Dobie Creek Greenway, once it's built, will provide safe bike and ped access for Innovation Park, Wells Fargo, CIC, Shorenstein, and about, gosh, Toby, probably 12 other housing developments that are happening over in that area. So again, this is a priority strategy, expanding safe bike and ped access. And this planning study actually advances this Dobie Creek Greenway now to funding ready. Next slide. This spring, we took a group of leaders, staff, and Julie joined us as well, to Columbus, Ohio. And the reason we went to Columbus was to learn about their city's investment in first mile, last mile, transportation, and smart transit infrastructure. Our transportation staff and leaders spent 2 days discussing with the City of Columbus Transportation, Transit, Ohio State University, and the Smart District organization on different programs that have allowed Columbus to increase its transit ridership and to provide greater access and service to that community. We also took a really hard look at the technology they're using as the backbone for the new programs. This trip actually has fueled our work in developing programs to better serve and utilize the BLE for business commute, but to also consider transit on demand for mobility within the University City submarket. So we had our first meeting post-trip this past week, and I am so excited about the direction that this is taking. Just a really great team working on this. Next slide. And you all can't read this, but since mid-March of this year, University City Partners, myself and my colleague Toby have been conducting the listening tour. And this is something we're going to do every other year. We're going to balance this between, we do a pretty extensive resident survey. We did that one last year. There's a summary of those findings in your packet. This listening tour, our intention was to connect with 150 constituents. As of today, we have met with 197. And I was with our board chair and Toby the other day, and I said, I'm actually getting tired of talking, which they find very, very hard to believe. But, you know, there's some findings from this, from our discussions with these. We have talked to businesses, hotels, institutions, the university, the hospital, education, churches, retailers, and now our very last bucket is residents. And since neighborhood groups haven't been meeting, we kind of saved this one for last, but that's kind of our last frontier. But it really has informed a lot of this has been a really good tool for us to use in the vetting of our vision plan, you know, to go out to folks and say, are we focusing on what's most important to you? Are we hitting the mark? It also gives them an opportunity to tell us what they think is most important to them as either a business, a retailer, a hotel, or a resident. We're using this to, as I mentioned, to share our draft vision plan, but we're also using this as we're talking with businesses and hotels and retailers to learn about talent and staffing. We're talking about employment opportunities, and are we connecting employment opportunities with the people who live in our community? This is very difficult to do. You know, when Topgolf came, there was a commitment early on in the process that they would make an extra effort to hire from the community. When I reached out to them to ask them how they were doing that, they weren't doing any of it. So, you know, it takes an organization or, someone who is responsible for tracking that. So we, really pushed on them. We made some connections with them in the community, and we pushed on them to go to have 2 job fairs at Vance High School. And now when you walk into this Topgolf, you'll see that the employment really does reflect the community. Right? It really reflects the community. But we also want to make sure that we're looking to the future needs of our companies. We know that business follows talent. That is one of the reasons we've been so successful in University City in recruiting businesses here. And we're going to use the information we get from our listening tour to inform training and education, and then the work we do with the city's economic development team on how we market University City. Next slide. So, executing big ideas. And our program of work for this next year is in your packet. It's on a page, I think it says Impact. This was a project we actually worked on for about 16 months with Duke Energy. There's a huge substation, an entire city block. It looks smaller in this picture, but it's an entire city block. That is across the street from Walmart, and Duke Energy paid to put the LED lighting on it. They had somebody do all of the controls. They gifted that to us. We just pay the power bill on it. But the reason why it took so long for us to get this implemented is that they wanted to figure out how they could create a process around this, because they want to do it in other signature places where they have this type of infrastructure in a very public place. So we actually connected them back to Center City Partners because their project didn't follow these confines, and they needed to update software and things like that. But we're really excited. It has been a beautiful addition to University City's nightscape. As you can see here, we're celebrating Charlotte Pride. And we're looking for more of these projects where we can work in a public-private environment and really leverage some of the infrastructure that's already in place. Next slide. So one of the challenges, I'm going to talk a little bit about priority focus areas for us. One of the challenges that we have been experiencing this spring is that we don't have places for kids. And when I say places for kids, I mean young teenagers. And it is becoming more and more obvious as the pandemic lifts and kids want to get out. There is nothing for them to do. And our YMCA is not directly connected to where the kids want to be. Our YMCA is a little more remote. The kids want to be along the light rail and around the lakefront. So we have really been challenged by this, and we've had several meetings with local grassroots organizations and with the YMCA because we're at a point in our development where we can do something about this. We don't have parks. That's another place where kids hang out. We don't have any parks. So this is going to be an area of focus for us. This is something I don't think Charlotte does well, period, is creating places for young teens, before they get their driver's license. But we're going to try to figure this out. We're going to try to figure this out in a public-private way, working with our community partners that already exist within University City. Developing these partnerships is not easy, and it's hard to wrangle all of these cats sometimes, but we're committed to it. We also believe that if we can identify the right places, like we have a great par 3 golf course that's right close to the rail line. We have, of course, a lakefront, but we have open spaces that aren't programmed. A big lawn space, probably half an acre in front of the IKEA store. We have places. We just have to be intentional about making sure we're thinking about this demographic of our population. Next slide. We're going to continue working on increasing the utilization of our greenways. We've also, in our vision plan, identified a project that will create a stroll street in University City because we have these gigantic streets that are miserable to walk along, if at all. We've identified some north-south connectors that run parallel to the light rail line that will give us the opportunity to not have to get in a car to get from station to station. That will actually provide a really pleasant environment. We do have some challenges along our greenways. We have a ridiculously big Charlotte Water projects that's going to close most of our greenway for the next 3 years, parts of our greenway for the next 3 years. It is necessary and needed, but it's going to be painful for us in the short term. Next slide. Mobility. So for University City Partners, we're going to be stretching in our role to support the collective effort to bring these programs to fruition. And we don't know what that looks like yet, but what we have said to city staff and to CATS is that we're all in. And if it requires us to do something that's outside of our comfort zone, it is important that we figure out how to do first and last mile. It is important that we figure out how to evolve our transit service and the way we deliver it to our folks for how we grow into the future. Next slide. The University City started a farmer's market. We piloted this last fall. It came back to University City. We produced this. We pay to produce it. We pay to market it. We have a team of community folks in our staff that work on recruiting vendors. But this is we want this market to be the thing that everybody in our area does on a Saturday. It's where everybody goes. It is expensive to produce this. It is an event every single weekend. And it takes time to develop markets. It takes time to develop an attendance there. Next slide. We think that it's important. Next slide. We think that it's important that the community, that our market serves the community that has many cultures and ethnicities. Next slide. Our vendors should reflect our community, and when at all possible, should be from our community. Manola's Bakery has a sidewalk cafe, so they anchor one end of our farmers market, and they have a sidewalk cafe where patrons can purchase his pastries. And then there's a mobile coffee shop. We set up some bistro tables so people can come here with their families and enjoy a morning. And of course, there's live music because we're trying to do everything we can to support music everywhere. Next slide. We have a focus for programming for kids and for families because that's in our DNA. That's what we do really well. We do kids and families. This month is storybook readings by fairies. You can see them under the yellow tent, and face painting. Next month we'll have activities from She Built This City and DigiBridge. So we're really, really focused on how do we create things for all of our constituents, not just people who are coming to buy produce. Next slide. And I snapped this picture at our farmers market probably 3 weeks ago. And when I took this picture, it made me think that maybe we can win at this. Maybe we can win at this. Next slide. So this document is also in your handout that I gave you. This is our the way we're going to invest our MSD and foundation money for next year. Our sponsorship monies fluctuate depending on what type of programs or projects pop up, like the Greenway project we did with Park and Rec to identify the future of Dobie Creek Greenway. One thing that I didn't mention, it is spelled out in your document, is that the city has an MWSBE requirement or request for MSDs, and our MSD is required to spend at least $10,000 with small minority women-owned businesses. Last year we spent $132,000. This year we're spending $141,000. That's 25% of our budget, not including rent and salaries, which we can't really control. But 25% of our budget goes to MWSBE vendors. And that's not easy to do, but we are very intentional and focused on doing that, and we're proud of the work that we do. We're also very proud to serve this city. We love to work in University City, and I'm going to ask Toby, who is my colleague, stand up. If you don't know Toby, this guy is jack of all trades planning. He has a master's degree in regional transportation planning, so he's the right guy for helping us figure out this transit thing. But he has just been, we all hustle, and it's a lot of work when you have a small team. But we are energized by the growth of this city. We're energized by the partners that we work with. And we're energized by the people who we serve. So.
I think you just energized us, and I'm going to ask Mr. Graham, and then followed by Mr. Winston and Mr. Phipps.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Great presentation. By chance, a mutual friend got us together for lunch on Friday. And so we spent a lot of time Friday talking about University City. I'm a 27-year resident of University City. I know it like the back of my hand, and represented a portion of it as the council District 2, but in previous lives represented all of it. And so I just want to really thank you for all the work that you've done. We even talked about Mary Hopper, Madam Mayor, and that's a name from the past that maybe one or two people in this room knew who she was, but she was the original executive director of University City Partners. Again, great presentation. Her staff is small, but you can see by the body of work that they're doing a lot of work. Their budget is small in comparison to others, but they're doing a lot of work, and they really, really deserve our support in any way we can give to them beyond with what they receive through their tax collection via their geographical area. They are limited, and I'm pretty sure she would probably say this as well. She referred to it twice. It's just we're just surrounded by state roads, and it's really hard to activate and bring people together and do a lot of placemaking because of it. And even when I served as chairman of the transportation committee at the state level, I mean, just getting sidewalks on Harris Boulevard was beyond anyone's control, right? It just can't happen.
And NCDOT is not planning on any road diets anytime in the near future.
No, it's growing area. So that's one of my concern as a resident and as someone working with Darlene. It's just the traffic, and it's growing, and it's hard to place make. But I just wanted to say publicly that I really, really support what you're doing over there. I really appreciate the efforts that you're making, as well as your staff. A lot of work is going on in University City. The great work of the university itself. The Marriott Hotel is out of the box. Topgolf is out of the box. Mr. Manager, I wish we had park and recreation under our jurisdiction. We've talked about that before. But just kudos and thank you very much for the presentation, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Same here. Thank you. Can I make one more comment? And this is regarding, yes.
Thank you for the presentation. In regards to parks, something that you and I have spoken about since I've been on council, and thank you for including it. Can you give us a bit of an idea about, what are your communications or what is the relationship like with the county and the Parks and Recreation Division? Are there any kind of plans in the works? I know they're working on their master plan. Do they have any plans to kind of focus on the university area or not? Can you just kind of give us some insight into that relationship, please?
Yes. So when I started at University City Partners almost 8 years ago, the first thing that we did was we worked with Park and Rec to create a park plan. Because when I went to them and said, why do we have no parks? And they said, we don't have a plan for parks up here. We wouldn't know where to put them. So we worked in partnership with the university and Park and Rec, and we developed a park plan. Every year I get up in front of the county commission and I talk about the fact that we have not executed against this park plan, that we are the least served community by park space of anywhere in Mecklenburg County. We've mapped all the investments that the county has made in parks and other recreation assets, and there's a big gaping hole in University City. We meet probably every month, every other month with Park and Rec. They do have land under contract in the University Research Park. It's largely going to just be land that is preserved with trails in them. So it's not the type of parks that we can program. And one of them, I'm not sure if it's going to make it across the finish line because we're standing pretty firm about needing a road connection through there because of exactly what Malcolm was talking about. And we told Park and Rec and County Real Estate this when they went after the project, and they don't want to build the road. And it's a road that creates another exit point for the University Research Park. And y'all know how much the University Research Park is growing. We are working with them on the 5-acre park at the University City Station. That won't trigger until we get a build-to-suit tenant for that development. So that will probably be another 15 years. Even with the land that Park and Rec purchased, we know that they're in a big land acquisition mode right now. They're not in a building parks mode. So I'm guessing that even with the land that they've purchased, we probably won't see a park built in University City for at least another 4 to 5 years. We're talking with them. We talk with them all the time about other parcels. We're trying to get them to figure out how to put a park at the J.W. Clay Station, which is our town center. They were late to the game, with the developer, despite a lot of invitations and outreach. And I don't know that we're going to be able to bring that one across the finish line. We keep trying. We've met with both developers. Both developers are willing to give up some space, but that land is incredibly expensive. And Park and Rec has really high expectations for what they want to see in a park. And I don't blame them for that. It's just, it's a shame that, they weren't part of the planning process when we first started this. So does that answer your question? Right now we're looking at the YMCA has beautiful property. How do we utilize that as a park space? We're looking at the university. Are there places on the university campus that we can program and make more amenable to a park space, a park-like experience? So we're duct taping it together. That's the best explanation I can give you, that we're doing the best that we can with what we have. We're not going to let it get us down. Like I said, we do have great greenways.
Yeah, no, I think you did answer my question, and thank you for that. Madam Mayor and Mr. Manager, I know that this is something that, the comp plan overall kind of talks about, something that we talk about in general from a citywide standpoint, but I wonder if there isn't maybe the opportunity, maybe through intergovernmental or transportation and planning, to think about how do we focus on university area and hearing what Ms. Heater said in terms of how it does or doesn't work. We know that it's important to continue to grow, right? As we continue to attract businesses, as Ms. Heater said, what are the people that move here going to do with their kids? When they come and take a job up at University City. I think that's something that we need to consider and maybe figure out a better solution. Can you talk a little bit about the mall? Is there a certain outlook? Is there any type of concerns that
Concord Mills Mall?
No, North Lake.
The North Lake Mall?
Is that outside of your purview?
It is.
It is.
It is. Concord Mills actually closer to us than North Lake.
Well, the last question I wish.
And yes, I am worried about that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we could talk about that maybe offline. I wish Center City Partners was still in here. But something I'd like us to consider is how do we work together to do big ideas and big things, right? So, for instance, something I've talked to the manager about and something I talked to the new president of UNC Charlotte about, right? How do we think about finding intersections in our goals, in our growth, and in what we should aspire to be, right? I have an idea of we should be one of the premier destinations for schools, right? For a school or collegiate athletics, right? Mm-hmm. And that's something that if we want to compete with the Chapel Hills, compete with the Clemsons, compete with the NC States. Of getting the top talent to come to Charlotte, I think that's something that UNC Charlotte can't do alone. I don't think that's something the city of Charlotte can do alone. It's not something you guys can do alone. But it is something that we can do if we all kind of work together. And I think Charlotte Center City Partners is, like I said, is another example of how do we kind of intersect all of those big things. And if we do have that aspirational goal, how do we kind of work together to do big things like that? I really do think making UNC Charlotte the premier destination of more people, of
100%.
top talent, is something that is achievable if we.
I really appreciate this conversation. We've got 3 other council members that want to speak. I do want to say this, though, is that at some point we are going to have to consider there's growth all over this county. And we know that we have deficits. At some point, these priorities, as Mr. Winston has said, we have to choose some things to work on. I wish we could do it all, but we're going to have to figure that out, and at some point, the council will. And my goal is that we do it in a way that we're actually using data, helping people see the value, and that we bring along a lot more partnerships, because we'll never be able to do it alone. So we just need to continue to keep it in mind. So I've got 3 other people. It's now it's a little after 7:30. So I'm going to recognize Mr. Phipps, followed by Mayor Pro Tem, and then by Ms. Ajmira. And then we're going to go to the business agenda for this meeting tonight. And Ms. Johnson. Okay. So then we'll then go to the business agenda. Mr. Phipps?
Yes, I'd just like to say, I know I'm not going to repeat what Mr. Graham has said. He's probably looked at my notes and went. But I was honored to serve on the University City Partners Board for 7 years, starting out with Ms. Harper and then with Darlene. And I can tell you they do work extremely hard with the staff that they have, transforming University City from a mere submarket to a destination. So I'm really proud. And I've been in University City now, living in University City for 23 years. So I've seen the transformation of University City over those years. But I do have a question. In looking at your material and your listening sessions and residential surveys, I was wondering, inasmuch as we've attracted a host of companies to the area, have any of them really expressed any desire for more upscale housing, executive housing, or just more than just apartments up in University City? I can imagine that, we're attracting these businesses, and then at the end of the day, they get in their cars and head either north or south. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, has any talk been given to maybe some better housing options in University City?
The answer is yes, always. Brokers always ask us that. What we always point out to brokers is University City is a community of neighborhoods. I think we have 37 neighborhoods. Most of that's single family homes, if I'm remembering correctly. We're building a ton of multifamily now, multifamily that is obviously the thing to build right now. And we're taking it because we're growing at such a pace where we know we are at the point now where we're not housing all of the people who are moving here. So we have got to figure out how to build housing more quickly. We were just talking with Councilmember Graham about a parcel that's going to come to council for rezoning, and it changes a residential zoning to an industrial zoning, and they want to build industrial complexes there, which is that what we want to do. I mean, we're fine either way, but we want to make sure that it's a conscious decision by our city leaders that said we're going to vote to change this to an industrial use and give up 200 acres that could be used for housing, and 200 acres across from a grocery store and on a transit line and next to an interstate and where there's a lot of jobs. Like I said, we're good either way. We just want to make sure that we're bringing the issue up, because this is not going to be the last time that you're going to be faced with these kinds of decisions. There is a new development that is going to come just about 2 miles away from the core of University City that is going to bring some higher end housing. I still don't think it's going to hit the $1.3 million or $2 million price point that you're seeing down at Quail and where a lot of these CEOs are living. But we are getting a pretty significant investment from Toll Brothers in a new housing development that's going to bring about 400 new homes to University City, and they're not going to be starter homes. How about that?
All right. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I'll make it really quick, Darlene. I just wanted to say thank you for all your hard work and your advocacy for this area. And being that connection between government and the private sector and the residents. And thank you especially for that on-the-ground work to try to make this kind of really the leading area of town for mobility, for different options to mobility in lieu, well, because of the, as you say, ridiculously large roads that are up there, they can't really do much about, so.
Yeah, if you all get a chance, I would ask you to do one thing. Go to the intersection of Mallard Creek Road and Harris Boulevard. It was recently paved, and Toby the other day sent me a list of the STIP projects that are proposed for University City over the next 5 to 10 years. And the state is going to add lanes to that. And it is literally, I swear, it is the size of a football field, that intersection is. It is 9 lanes. It's bigger than the interstate. Wider than the interstate, and the proposal is to add more lanes to it.
Well, I wish we could get the state to think about transit and not just transportation.
Wish we could too.
Thank you.
Wish we could too.
Ms. Ajmira?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Darlene, thank you so much for your work Councilmember Johnson and I were at the boardwalk a couple of months ago, and we were talking to the owner of boat paddling there, and you're talking about the farmers market and wine festival and all these activities and traction that you're bringing to the boardwalk. And the owner said, well, we do whatever Darlene does ask of us. So I can see that level of support from the private sector that is there. Certainly, I appreciate your advocacy for the green space, especially for the park space in the university area. While when it comes to sidewalks, we may not be able to do much about it because it is state's responsibility. What we can do is the street lights. And I know I've advocated for this for a while, where W.T. Harris Road, especially from Old Concord all the way to Plaza, there are no street lights. Other day I was driving by and I had seen a couple of accidents because of deer hitting one of the cars. And I think street lights, it's something that we can address. And I know Mr. Manager have included in our budget for 2022 additional funding for street lights, especially for Vision Zero. So I do hope that becomes a priority, because as Darlene said, that it is, we got to address some of these issues, especially around infrastructure, because it also becomes a safety issue. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank Darlene and Toby for all of the work that they do in the University City. The day after I won the primary, and hadn't even won the election yet, Darlene was the first meeting I had. So she and I work very closely. I think we meet every other week. So I just appreciate all of the work that you and Toby are doing in the community. I'm honored to serve the university and honored to serve on the board of UCP. So thank you. When you talk about the industrial zoning, there are actually two of them in the university area. And I know we've spoken about at least one of them. I met with CDOT and zoning to talk about it. So continue the work that you're doing. District 4 truly is the home of the jobs. I've said that on the dais several times, and you're a huge part of that, Darlene. So thank you to you and to your team for all of your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm just going to mention one thing, because I know you're quick, and this is in regard to homelessness. If any of you are interested, we are doing a remarkable job with addressing homelessness in University City. And we are not waiting for a big plan. We're not working with 140 organizations. We're working with our police department and our churches. We have we have eliminated and housed, I think, 15 homeless camps. We have the one that was remaining, which was a really, really difficult one. We just were able to get them into a program. I just heard about another one today. Clearly, we don't have the magnitude of the homelessness issue that we have in Center City. But if you want to see how just brass tacks get down and get the work done works, come on up. We also had another program to address panhandling. And you will come through University City, and what, Greg, maybe 2 years ago, there was a panhandler on every corner at every intersection. You may see one. You may see one. So, and that's big hats off to CMPD. We have a remarkable captain and a lieutenant, and nobody's allowed to take him from me because he's going to retire in like 2 years. And he is amazing.
You can
so
send us
off.
his name and we'll send him a note. Okay.
No, he's doing amazing work. So there are community solutions.
All right.
Thank you all.
Mayor, can I say one more thing about Darlene? I'm sorry, as the university rep, I do want to say Darlene is also taking a very practical approach in littering. It's a part of the budget, and they actually pay a vendor to clean up the litter in that portion of the city. So again, hats off to the work that she's doing, and she demonstrates how community solutions and public-private partnerships can really be the answer for many of the problems in the districts. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a reminder, we are.
Leaving. Exit. Thank you, Darlene. We just need to come out and visit more, I think. Okay. All right. We're going to approve your budget, though, so you should be glad to see that we're going to get to that. All right. So the next, we do not have a closed session, so tonight. So the next item on our agenda is the consent items. And we have 51 has been settled, item 51. Item 54 has been deferred until June the 28th. Item 55 has been deferred until September 9th, August 9th. Okay.
Motion to approve the consent agenda with those changes you just said.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second to adopt any discussion on any item on the consent agenda that's included in the motion. Hearing none, let's do our roll call vote. Mr. Graham. Mr. Graham is gone. All right, here we go. All right, Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Phipps?
Yes.
Mr. Winston? All right, Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Winston? All right, that motion passes. So now we go to we do not have any speakers signed up. So we'll now go to our public hearing, and we have several public hearings. The first item is a public hearing on proposed amendments to development-related ordinances. We're conducting a public hearing on the proposed amendments to the following city code of ordinances to bring them in compliance with North Carolina State General Statute legislation for Chapter 160D related to development by July 1, 2021 deadline, Chapter 9 on floodplain regulations, Chapter 11 on housing, Chapter 17, soil erosion and sedimentation control, Chapter 18, Article 4, post-construction stormwater, and Chapter 19, streets, sidewalks, and other public places. We've had a presentation by the City Attorney's Office. Are there any questions for the City Attorney or any questions?
Are there any speakers?
All right. Do we have any speakers?
Motion to close the public hearing.
We have a motion to close the public hearing. And the next item, let me get past all of the context and,
You'll need to close it.
oh, I know, we're going to get there. I'm just trying to close all of these things out of this book. All right, the next, you're right. Now we have to vote. Where is this? It's a lot of paper. All right, here we are. On the roll call vote, did we have a motion and a second? You two?
Yes.
Right? Mr. Graham? Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Phipps?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
Yes.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
The next item is conduct a public hearing regarding approval of the City of Charlotte Business Investment Grant to Robin Hood Markets, Inc. Do we have any speakers?
Motion to close the public hearing.
We have a motion and a
Second?
second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, no discussion. So, Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Phipps?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
Yes.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
All right. The next item is a public hearing to close a portion of Gloryland Avenue. Do we have any speakers?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second? Second.
Motion and a second to close the public hearing. Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
She-
What?
Her mic is off, yeah.
Okay.
She said yes.
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Phipps?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
Yes.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
The next public hearing is to close a portion of South Graham Street. Do we have any speakers, Madam Clerk?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Phipps?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
Yes.
Mr. Bakari? Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
The city manager do you have a report?
I do
I
not.
think the next item covers your report. All right. The next item on our agenda is adopt the fiscal year 2022 appropriations and tax ordinance, the FY 2022 compensation and benefits recommendations, and other items related to the annual budget ordinance adoption, which includes the operating appropriation tax levy ordinance, the capital investment plan, the solid waste fee, the stormwater services, the transit operating budget, the transit capital improvement program, the Charlotte water rate methodology by improving revisions to the revenue manual, the 2022 Charlotte water rates, the 2022 compensation and benefit plans and associated human resources contracts, the outside agency and municipal service district contracts, the capital investment plan program policies, a resolution for release of collateral, and other miscellaneous budget items. Do I have a motion to adopt?
Move to approve A through L.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. Now, is there any discussion on the budget? Hearing no discussion, Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand up. All right.
Oh, that was going to be a miracle.
Yeah, almost.
Try to say yes.
All right. Mr. Bakari?
Thank you. I'll be brief since no one else seems to have any comments. First of all, by and large, the staff has done a great job, as always, in a very tough time putting together a very complicated budget with a lot of good stuff in it. I will just say that despite all that, we continue to make strides with CMPD pay increases and first responder pay increases, but we have a lot more we need to do on that front, and we're not even remotely close to where we need to be to give them the support they need with the challenges they're facing today. But we're making good strides there. And then aside from some process issues I have around our workforce funding inside this budget that we must have more transparency around, there's really just one reason that I'm going to vote against this budget tonight, which is the mayor and council pay increases. I am a firm believer that this is a form of sacrifice, that we need to be able to come here and serve for a short period of time to give back to our community. And when we increase the pay, where it becomes a viable option for people to make this a career, it will become a career job. But despite all of that, even if that weren't the case, now is the worst time, maybe in the modern history of Charlotte, for us to be considering doing something like this. 5.8% unemployment rates nationally. Our hospitality and tourism industry is reeling locally right now. There's over 10,000 small businesses that are trying to figure out how to piece their lives, their families' lives, and their employees' lives back together. And we have thousands of employees in the city of Charlotte working here that are also just trying to make their way through this post-pandemic world. And there couldn't be a worse time for us to consider giving ourselves a raise right now. So for that reason and that reason alone, I'll be voting against the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Bakari. Mayor Pro Tem Iselt?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also want to say thank you to staff and the city manager, the budget team that put together an amazing budget again during a pandemic. It's pretty remarkable, and it just really speaks to how well the city is being run and continuing to provide important services to our residents. And two things I want to mention. I'm really excited about the future for our arts sector, and I thank the manager for his work on leveraging our money in the budget without a tax increase and getting the private sector to go along with us. And for anyone who missed that announcement, the private sector stepped up with $20 million so far over 3 years. So that's a great leverage for us to do some things that will make I think it's going to unleash the potential for our entire sector for arts and culture. And then the second thing is I thank you for stepping up for more money for pedestrian safety, for bicyclists and pedestrian safety and mobility. And Darlene spoke about the need for that, and Ms. Heater spoke about the need for that in University City. And it's obvious that we just need more ways for people to get around safely, and greenways are no longer just for strolling when you're out having fun. It's the way people get to work and get around, and so thank you for that and for the improvements on Vision Zero. So thank you.
All right. Mr. Driggs?
So I just want to say briefly, since we're speaking, I certainly agree with the views expressed by Mr. Bakari. I voted against the pay increase. I'm always in favor of greater investment in public safety. However, I've reached my conclusion based on the fact that there are a lot of things about this budget that are right. It's structurally balanced. The pay increases we're able to offer city employees. And I'm grateful also for some investment in my district that I've been trying to get for the increased investment in sidewalks. So you can't love everything about a budget. And I just think that there's a lot about this budget that is good, and that's why I've made the motion to approve it. And I congratulate you, sir. Thank you.
All right. Any other comment?
Ms.
Yes,
Ajmera.
Ms. Ajmera?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Someone wise said once to me that don't talk about the budget. Show me the budget, and I can tell you what is important to you all. And I can tell you from looking at the budget, our priorities are being reflected in the budget that is in front of us. Public safety, housing, infrastructure, environment, and our employees. So I am very proud of the work that staff has done, and I look forward to supporting it.
All right. Okay. With that comment, with those comments, I'll begin the vote. Mr. Graham?
Absolutely, yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Eisel?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmera?
Yes.
Mr. Phipps?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
Yes.
Mr. Bakari?
No.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
All right. I want to say to the entire city organization, I know leadership starts in the manager's office, but we have leaders throughout this entire organization, and the people around this dais represent this community in a way that this budget really shows the values that you bring from your districts or at large or wherever. It has got everything that you talked about when we tried to talk about what makes a city a place where people choose to live, that maintains our quality of life. And I just want to say, leadership, top to bottom, thank you. Thank you very much. And we did it without a tax increase. You know, I don't know how we manage it sometimes, but we are the lowest tax rate, I believe, in the state. Now, that's a lot to say about our growth and our ability to do that, but at the same time, to have the lowest tax rate in the state and be on the corridor that we are for Charlotte to Raleigh, and be producing and providing and giving back to other parts of our state and especially to the federal government, I think that the fiscal management of this organization is strong and well done, and it's grateful to you guys for taking the examination. The Budget and Effectiveness Committee works really hard, but I think everybody on this council works really hard to represent the needs of this community, and this budget is successful in doing so. So with that, we are done with our budget agenda, and I believe that it's now time for us to go. Oh, Mr. Phipps? Yes, I think it's time for item 15. I just got to. Okay, now we're on item 15, adopt the following Budget and Effectiveness Council Committee's recommendation. These will all be voted on in a separate vote. So I'm going to start with A. Regarding City Council's October 12, 2020 action to continue indefinitely meeting council options for virtual participation in official meetings by amending it to end upon the termination of the statewide declaration of emergency.
Motion to adopt A.
Second.
Any comments or discussion on A? Mr. Driggs, anything?
I can explain briefly. We've had the briefing already from council
Yes.
about this, so we have heard the issues here. We know that prior to COVID, our policy was that you could not participate in meetings virtually except under specific circumstances. During COVID, there was a state law that gave us greater scope to meet virtually, and we exercised that option. We had to for a while. Now we're looking at the prospect of that being lifted again, the state of emergency being lifted, and with it, the special law that was passed by the legislature. So our question is, how do we proceed from now on? One of the steps we need to take is, as described in A, and that is to take the action that we took on the interim basis, which was open-ended and unrestricted, let that sunset when the state of emergency ends, and then you'll see that B and C talk about what we might do instead subsequently. So right now, we're just going to fix the action we took in October.
And Ms. Watlington had a question.
To that point, help me understand the timing. Is the intent that B and C is addressed before the state of emergency ends, or will there be some kind of lull in between?
I think if it's okay, we'll vote on A and then talk about B and C,
Well, I need to know about the plan going forward before I vote on A, because what
I
I'm
don't
concerned.
think that we know when the emergency declaration will be lifted. The governor makes that decision.
Right. Well, let me ask it this way. What I'm saying is I just don't want there to be this time period where we're not exactly sure what we're doing and before we've made a decision. So I'm just trying to understand how soon are these B and C going to be addressed?
So under A, the assumption would be that we would simply sunset that action that we took in October as of the time that the state of emergency is lifts. Nothing changes right now, right? All it says is that at that future time, that will end. In the meantime, we have B and C, which will inform what we put in place instead to become effective at the end. So in the interim period, my expectation is that we will have meetings the way we do, and like this one, and then we'll talk about B and C in a minute.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and
Maybe-
have, I'm sorry, Ms. Ajmira?
Yes, I would like to make a substitute motion to adopt A and B both. That came out of the committee.
All right, so Ms. Johnson, Ms. Johnson is suggesting, in addition to the changing to come in compliance with the declaration of emergency, that we also update the current Rule 28 and Rules and Procedure for the Charlotte City Council to broaden the circumstances for council members to participate virtually. I think that what I'm going to ask the committee chair, I thought that the idea was to have council members speak to the definition of this, but
So Mayor, the concern here is that I believe, if I understand my colleague correctly, that we not put that sunset in place without also including.
Making a decision.
The concern I have about that is that we didn't have a chance in committee to establish what that broadening would be. So Councilmember Johnson, I know that was an issue, particularly of yours. That's why it's here. But we can include in the vote on A the idea that we will look at broadening the circumstances, but the fact is we can't offer anything tonight that specifies what those broadened circumstances would be. And that's why I was hoping that we could just get A done. And in a minute, we'll talk about B, and I have a feeling that what may come out of that conversation is, at least my recommendation was going to be that we refer B back to committee and that we take in recommendations or comments from the full council, and that the committee then come forward to the full council with a more specific proposal about how we address the item in B. It's clear that we need to talk about it, and we will need to consider suggestions for broadening the rules, but other than just sort of saying we will broaden the rules, there's nothing to act on tonight.
Ms. Ajmira, did you hear Mr. Drake's response? Ms. Ajmira?
But I did make a substitute motion where I'd like to adopt A and B both together because that came out of the committee by majority.
That's not, no, it didn't.
They were separate votes.
They were
Wait, I seconded.
She's already gotten a second from Ms. Johnson. So the substitute motion is to adopt A and to adopt B. I guess what I'm concerned about is the term broaden the circumstances and understanding what is the definition of broadened circumstances that we would enact in a rule. So I think that just for me, it's not that I'm saying, I just think that the motion is to broaden. That could be, let's go to the beach every weekend. I don't know. But I just think that I'm trying to figure out, Ms. Ashmira, it's your motion.
Yes.
What would you mean by what is the definition of broaden the circumstances?
So as a committee, we did not discuss the specifics of what that looks like, so that will go back to the committee for specific discussion. However, I would like to keep A and B together in my motion.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Winston?
So my interpretation of B would, if this is successful and gets 6 votes, this would say that we have work to do, and this would guide staff to bring options, bring possibilities about what a broadened circumstance for council members to participate virtually in a hybrid motion. So I don't think it needs specifics. I think that's the kind of guidance that we're giving staff of the work that they need to bring back to us and work with us on.
So staff is working with under the guidance of the council for this discussion. So it really would mean that the committee or the council would have the information and this is kind of the procedure of the council meeting schedule. So I think the staff would write whatever the council approves. So I'm just trying to make sure that everybody's on the same page. I don't think this is it's staff assisted, but not driven by. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, all right. Just want to make sure. I had Mr. Eggleston and next. Mr. Eggleston?
I'm fine with just voting on the substitute, but I think adopting just A does not prevent us from having an additional discussion about things that we might want to change, but we might not want to change. So this implies a change to Rule 28 that a majority of council might or might not be in favor of, depending on what the specifics of the change were. So I think that would be something you or the manager or council could direct the committee to further discuss Rule 28, but I would not be in favor of voting to update without knowing what the specifics of the update we were directing.
I'm going to take a chance. I watched the meeting. I was not a participant in the meeting, so I'm going to ask Mr. Driggs this. I thought that the concept was we know that A has to be done. What we didn't know is where the committee how the committee could hear from the council. And so tonight I thought we would actually go around the room and say, okay, how do you feel about the idea of what should be updated in Rule 28? So everybody would get a chance to state their thoughts about it, and it would go back to the committee to shape whatever those thoughts were. But if I think that Ms. Ajmira has, this council can be very procedural sometimes. Ms. Ajmira has made a statement at least 3 times to me that she is expecting a vote on a motion that she had made and was second. So I'm not going to try to stop that. But I think the intent would be, whether it's up or down, we still have to have the same discussion about what does the council want to do. So I have Mr. Driggs and then Ms. Watlington.
I just want to point out a vote for A does not in any way limit our options about B. And the issue with B is that can go in different directions. And from our committee meeting and my conversations with the attorney, there are issues about quorum, there are issues about majority vote. So as we approach B, we just need to be very careful and specific. And we need to be thoughtful also just about non-legal reasons related to in-person meetings, to the public being able to actually see their council members at work. So it's going to take more work to get B done. I don't think we're in any way excluding B by voting on A. And I don't know what, if there's a lot of harm in voting on the 2 of them, but I can tell you that A is actionable and B, in my mind, is not yet actionable by us.
All right, I had Ms. Johnson. She's not spoken yet. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. The reason I made the motion in October for to not discuss it or to enact this rule indefinitely, because we had spent so much time talking about virtual meetings. We've spent more time already talking about this than we did our $2 billion budget.
I wouldn't say that. I think we spent 6 months talking about that budget now. I'm not going with that one, Ms. Johnson.
It's tonight's meeting, correct? So,
I could practically quote the budget ordinance.
It would be the appearance, okay? But you're right. We spent months talking about that. But tonight, the intent of looking at 28 is to look at 28 before we make the decision to end the virtual meetings. It's not that we are trying to go to the beach or not do people's work or not get work done. We've been getting great work done, as was reflected in our just recent budget approval. So I think that that I also wanted to take a look at the whole policy, and that didn't make it to the motion, but the whole policy, to look at the policy that we're working under. I mean, it's just about continuous improvement. And if we are able to get things done with a hybrid fashion, such as some virtual and some in person, then maybe it's time to take a look at that type of change. It allows more access for individuals who can run for office. And, you know, we can take a look at if that's just Mondays, if that's just committees, but I don't think this discussion needs to be over or us to make a decision because it's a change or it's a different style of leadership than some are used to. It's not like we're not doing the work. We work 7 days a week. We all know that. So the motion on the table was that we take a look at Rule 28 before we decide to sunset the policy. We are still under the governor's state of emergency. That's at least until the end of July. So there is time. So I'm going to be supporting the substitute motion.
All right, Ms. Watlington?
So two things. Councilmember Johnson just brought something up that my question is for the attorney or perhaps Mr. Chair. The status of looking at or the rules of procedure as a whole. I know you've already done some work in regards to that. Is that something that's happening separately from this?
Excuse me. The item that's before you right now is just on the virtual meeting provisions.
Right.
If council was interested in a global review of your rules of procedure, that would need to be a different agenda item.
But it's not already in progress is my question.
It is not formally, but I am reviewing everything just for, and I'll reach back out to you all during my evaluation period when we complete that about suggestions about that.
Okay. And just for your evaluation period.
We're trying to find a date to finish that. I hope it'll be in the next month or so.
Okay. And then just so I'm very clear, I interpreted, and my question is for Councilmember Edgemere because she entered this motion, just so I'm super clear. The way I'm viewing this and why I made the comment I did originally was that in order to move forward in terms of whether or not we wanted this situation we're in to sunset with the declaration of emergency, I wanted to make sure that we had our ducks in a row and we were clear about where we were going afterwards. So I absolutely see the logic behind bundling them, because what that does then is it basically creates the urgency for us to talk about this Rule 28. And I read this as very actionable in that the action is that we are saying we're going to update the current rule. And update may mean we reviewed it and we don't think there's any significant change that needs to be made, and that's fine. But what I think I'm hearing, Councilmember Edgemere, please confirm, is that the action here is to say we're going to adopt A and also B, saying that we are committing now to investigate what to do next on Rule 28, correct?
The motion is to combine the vote on A and B, so it's up or down on both. That's the substitute motion right now.
Right, but what I'm saying is the intent, and I'm asking the motion maker, is to say that we're going to agree to all sunset this at the end of the emergency and also to investigate Rule 28, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's correct.
I think we're going to vote on it. I don't know that that's what it says. It might be the intent, but it's update the current rules to broaden the circumstances. I think we just have to make sure, the intent is the words on the page, okay? Yeah, you have to vote on the words on the page unless you change them.
Well, and it sounds like she just did.
But the substitute was to do A and B. That's what the substitute motion. She made a substitute motion to vote for item A and B as one.
Understand,
Okay.
but to that point, update the current Rule 28 and the rules of procedure to broaden the circumstances. That sounds to me like a process, given that there's not an answer already
Sounds
here.
like a lot of us, yes.
That's
That's
the
what I'm
issue.
saying.
Yeah,
That's the
that's
issue.
the
That is
issue.
truly the issue, is what do we all think? But we haven't discussed what we think, but we're going to vote on the motion. Does that make sense?
It doesn't make any sense at all.
Okay,
but
all right. Okay, Mr. Jones.
So maybe I'll try to be helpful. I guess it's the how is what.
Yeah, it
So
is.
it's what comes next after you vote on A and B? Does it go back to committee? Is it the expectation that the manager works on it? And I think that's the.
So, Mr. Manager, what I feel is needed is suggestions. And I don't know that we're going to work our way all the way through this at this meeting, which is one of the issues I have about B. So what I need to hear from people is what their thoughts are and what that broadening looks like, so that we can have you look at it and the attorney look at it and kind of do the research around it. And that way, council, at a future occasion, not far in the future, will be able to say yes or no to something very specific. So that's why I invite my colleagues to just communicate to the members of the committee what their suggestions are, and let us do some more work. I mean, we're not suggesting that won't happen or can't happen. I view as kind of separate items the fact that not doing A puts us into kind of a little bit of a no man's land after the state of emergency is lifted. And all we're trying to do with both of these is say, let's be more intentional and thoughtful about where we are once the state of emergency ends, and not embark on something that could kind of be out of step with state law or invite some kind of legal challenge.
Right. So we can
So,
have
Madam
the
Mayor-
vote on the motion, and then we can, I don't know if the
Substitute
chair.
motion.
On the substitute motion.
Right.
So on the
Yes, so
substitute
Madam
motion,
Mayor,
Ms. Ajmira?
Oh, yes, so I just sort of the specifics. I know we are all hung up on the specifics right now, but we have not discussed that as a committee. So this will open up a door of opportunity for us to discuss.
Comes out, I'm just going to go around the room and ask you for your specifics of what you want the committee to consider. Ms. Johnson,
I'm sorry, what did Mr.
we're
Graham
voting
say?
on the substitute motion.
I know, what was his vote? I didn't hear it.
It was no.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Newton?
Yeah.
Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Isel?
No.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Phipps?
No?
One, two, three, four, 5 yeses and 6 noes. So the any further discussion? All right, so we're going to go with roll call. Mr. Graham? Yes. Ms. Johnson?
No.
What did you say? No. All right, Mr. Newton?
No.
Ms. Watlington?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms.
Yes.
I really don't, the motion passes to adopt A, but I'm very curious about the vote of saying no to something that we have to do legally.
I'll tell you, for me, it was just,
Okay.
for me, it's, you want, for a path forward. So to me, they just go together. That's why.
Feels like we're putting the cart
rule, but yet we're going to go ahead and move forward on the elimination, right, of
Is that correct? Am I saying this correctly?
You are. The issue is when the old rules, old Rule 28, you would have no longer.
We need to take a vote on that? Hearing that we need to take a vote on our bases first before we go forward. In our bases first before we go forward. From what you're telling.
So this is really to address the vote that occurred in was to stay virtually indefinitely, and that vote, as I recall, I believe.
So I think the question is, are you willing to leave some? I was just curious about that. But I understand. Now, what I'd like to do is actually for all members of the what you'd like to see for the rule to be updated or broadened, how maybe you should just send Mr. Driggs an email saying, this is my preference, this is the way I see the world. Everyone's prepared tonight to discuss it, and email to Mr. Driggs, and he can use that in the committee. With that, I'm going to go Mr. Winston.
I think we've learned a lot during the pandemic. A lot more with technology. You know, and so and we can do that technology is that I think we should look to, for instance, I don't want any of our decisions to come into necessarily legal consequence because the law hasn't adapted to technology. So I say that we go forward and try to change the rules and how we operate to give council members more flexibility. And I hope we take up letter C as well to give the public more flexibility on how to participate in government. But it's clear that that has to be matched with the lobbying of our legislatures to change the laws that allow us to do our business. So I think we should consider this on our legislative agenda as well, to update. And this is something that, as the conversation that we just had, what specifically would we be advocating for? But I think there's obviously something that we can lead here from a Charlotte perspective, but it has to be matched with that that lobbying to Raleigh to change the rules. So I hope that we can kind of compartmentalize this process moving forward in the committee work, and I think it's possible.
That's an excellent point, because while we're under state of emergency, there are also other legal rules, Mr. Baker, that we're under, and if we want to do some things, we'll have to have a legal review, and then if it's something we want to change at the state level, I think that's appropriate that we lobby to try to make it better. So
Mayor,
with that,
if I could just comment on that. I agree. What the purpose of this next step, and again, I'm proposing that we not try to take action on B tonight, but recognize that what is written there indicates more work. and that the council can vote when we've got more detailed stuff in front of us. At that time, it will be clear what would require accommodation by the legislature and what is within our own authority to do. The difficulty I have with this is that if we pass it tonight, I don't know what it does for us. And we can just agree tonight that we will keep working on these changes and then get around to a decision, a vote, when we know what the proposal is.
Well, that's why I thought if we went around and people expressed their ideas and thoughts, and then you got emails about them, then you can continue your work. So I had Ms. Watton, I mean, I understand what Mr. Winston said, and I agree that those are the things that we'll have to kind of look at. We have to have legal review, and then we want to adjust as we can. All right, what, Mr. Eggleston, I have two other people.
I just want to be on the list.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, Ms. Watlington?
Just largely, I just wanted to say that I agree with some of the earlier comments, Councilmember Johnson and what Councilmember Winston said. Whatever we do, it's got to be legal. So if there's a path that we need to go down with our General Assembly, definitely support that, and obviously want to do what is within our authority to do. I don't know about leading the way. Plenty of counties across North Carolina are doing this already, and they were doing it before the pandemic. So I think there's an opportunity for us to catch up. I do think when it comes to access and equity and why I supported raises for City Council, Mr. Bakari mentioned earlier about this is service for you, and bless God you're in a position to be able to do that. We are part-time council members. That's the way we're set up in the city. Unfortunately, we didn't address that, or we addressed it, but it wasn't supported to change that during the governance work. But what that means then is for the 99%, we have to work. And if we are going to have folks who are not independently wealthy or retired be able to represent the voices of the people in this community who are not a part of the socioeconomic elite, that means that we should do what we need to do in terms of technology and leverage everything that's available to ensure that those voices are heard. I also think that that is true for members of the public who may not be able to come down here in the middle of the day to the government center to speak to council. If we have the technology to hear their voices, I think we would be doing a disservice to not leverage it, particularly because we've shown for almost a year and a half that we can do that. For me, myself, I signed up for this and I knew what it would take. So it's really not about myself. It's more so about the folks that come behind us. We are a growing city. We're 15th largest city and hoping to have our sights set on 14th, right? So we got to innovate, and we got to think about how we do things differently here to really drive that equity that we say that we care about. So it can't be a gentleman's club anymore. It can't be a good old boys club for those that have the luxury of not having to have a full-time job to do this. So with that, obviously, I support flexibility there. As far as it relates to committee meetings, I think it's a different matter in the evenings, Monday nights to be here, but I look forward to continuing the conversation.
So your suggestions, you have, I understand the rationale, but tell me, do you have a specific suggestion you'd like the committee to discuss?
Well, my general specific suggestion I've already shared with the committee, and that is flexibility technology-wise for committee meetings. I noticed that in our current Rule 28, it says that committee meetings you can attend virtually or by telephone with 48 hours notice, but if you're ill or you have an injury, which was the other provision, you're not going to know 48 hours in advance. So I think we need to update that.
Rule. All right, flexibility for committees and meetings and the 48-hour rule of notice. All right, Mr. Phipps?
Yeah, I just want to get a copy of Rule 28 and Rule 5, since I wasn't on it. I'm not on the Budget Committee, Effective Committee, so, you know.
All right.
Just want to make sure I get a copy of it.
Mr. Eggleston?
I just wondered if this could be solved for the moment, since the one thing there does seem to be agreement on about BNC is that we need to have further conversations to consider what best practices are, what's legally allowed, and how we can be in the best position to succeed as a group if you or manager, or probably you, referring this back to the committee for that discussion instead of us trying to postulate on it tonight. That could be a more robust conversation in committee, and those who want to attend that committee meeting, whether they're on it or not, could. Those who wanted to voice their ideas or concerns to Mr. Driggs or other committee members could do that instead of us spitballing from from here tonight.
Absolutely. I just wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity. Mr. Driggs, I believe at the end of the meeting was kind of like quickly ended because it was a time constraint. It wasn't
we did run out of
the
time.
idea constraint for sure. It was definitely just time constraint. So Mr. Driggs is going to take whatever we talk about tonight back, and please encourage people to talk to him. I don't think that there's anything except, I think I heard two specifics, legal review and best practices so far, as well as the committee meetings being looked at separately and the notice. So, but those are the three folks that I had on this end of the table that wanted to talk, and now I have Mr. Bakari.
Thanks. Yeah, the things I would offer up for you guys to consider specifically would be, one, that we maintain the ability to have some level of remote attendance to weekly committee meetings, considering that, while requiring in-person attendance to Monday night full council meetings, with one exception being we work towards an approach where it isn't something that individuals can come and say, well, I'm not going to show up today because I'm not feeling well or this or that. It becomes something where it's like we look for more macro trends. Something is changing with a pandemic kind of testing results or something, and we call it for the entire council, not given individuals. So it would go back to there. And then, and the only other thing is a tenet around making sure that the public forums, particularly on zoning nights, constituents are able to come in person. Because I feel like that was probably one of the biggest losses of a voice heard over the last year. It just does not have the same effect when they sign up to speak, because a lot of times there would have been many of those that they would have packed the chamber, and I feel like we lost a lot of those voices. So again, flexibility within macro reason on Monday nights, committee meetings where when we have those abilities, and then making sure in public forums they have an audience in most cases.
All right. Ms. Johnson? Ms. Johnson?
Yes, thank you. I want to really support what my colleague Victoria, Councilmember Watlington said, but I have a question for Patrick, our city attorney. There have been statements that it's not legal for us to proceed remotely. Can you describe, during our committee meeting, we talked about us in comparison to the county. The county has that decision or that challenge because it's not in their policy that remote meetings are an option. So if you can describe the legality of our meeting remotely, because if I recall correctly, I thought we were meeting remotely prior to the state of emergency, or we're not just meeting due to the state of emergency. So if you can clarify that, I would appreciate that.
Thank you.
Also, sorry, the last thing I want to say is Gibby Harris was at our committee meeting, and she reminded us that COVID is not over. So to say that there would have been individuals, and I'm sorry, my dog is sick, but anyway, to say that there would have been individuals packing the meeting because during the zoning meetings, not everyone. Some of us have taken this very seriously since the beginning. So even now, there are individuals who are still not going to be in crowded spaces because we cannot enforce any social distancing. So I think that we are cutting off accessibility for individuals who who want to speak at the meeting, who are still cautious about COVID. So I just think, we talk about the good old boys and the 99%. This is a way to expand accessibility for council members, future council members, and also the public. But I do want to hear from Patrick regarding the legality of our remote meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. I don't recall the specifics of how things went back in March and April, but as I recall, we missed several meetings while this conversation was occurring where municipalities were concerned about the legal authority to have a WebEx meeting. And once we got that direction from council, that's when we got back together and started proceeding based on the language From the legislature, yes. So once we got that language is when we move forward. But as I recall, we missed several meetings in March and April before we got that particular legislation going forward. All the statutes speak to about remote meetings is the notice requirement if you're going to do a remote meeting. There is no procedure whatsoever about how to move forward with a remote meeting prior to the pandemic. And again, once the state of emergency is lifted, then we're back in the same place that we were before.
All right, so it's outlined in our policy that we can meet remotely. And what we were looking at is taking off the specifics, such as sickness, and I can't remember. It's in our policy. It's viewable for all of us to look at. I would have hoped it would have been passed out tonight for the council members. It's definitely online. But anyway, is it illegal for us to meet remotely outside of the state of emergency?
It's going to be, and I'm sorry I can't give you a straight answer. It's going to be very dependent upon what that procedure is going to be. Not every local government does what Charlotte does. Some local governments have taken the clear legal authority that you have as a council to put forth rules of procedure and have used that legal authority to provide some limited opportunities for remote participation based on that statute that simply refers to what notice requirement is needed to participate remotely. So a lot of it, and I'm sorry, the devil's in the details, it is about what that procedure looks like. But the process that you have been operating under since April of last year, whenever that legislation went into effect, is tied specifically to the state of emergency. So the issue is when the state of emergency goes away, what are you back to? And that's ultimately the same situation that we were in before.
Ms. Johnson, if I or anyone on the council indicated this was illegal, that's, I would say, I'm sorry that we said that. We will just go with the legal review going forward so that we do have that level of detail that's available to us from the attorney's office. So we have been legal during this pandemic, a lot of the number of months that we have. All right, I have Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Driggs, and then Ms. Ajmira.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I can understand why we should have more conversation about possibly committee meetings having an option for virtual, and I am certainly empathetic to what Ms. Watlington said regarding people who are working full-time. I do feel strongly on Monday nights we should be here in person, but the committee issue, I think what would be helpful to really have more conversation on is things such as, should the chair of the committee be virtual? It's awfully difficult to run a committee if there's a room full of people and the chair is not there. So I think that would be one issue. If you're not in a position to be at committee meetings, then maybe you don't be chair. Secondly, again, if it's an issue, and of course we haven't seen this in the past year with COVID, but where you do have a room full of people, they're there usually because they want to try to talk to the committee members and staff about the particular topic that's being discussed in the committee meeting. So I just would still like to have a little bit more robust conversation about how we make sure that we have some of the committee there in person and not end up in a position where no one from the committee is there and you've got a room full of the public. So that's why I hope we'd have that opportunity to have more of a conversation about this in the Budget and Effectiveness Committee about what makes the most sense for the people that are coming to the committee meeting. And then lastly, I think Mr. Bakari brings up a good point with the public hearings that for zoning in particular, it's really powerful when you have a whole group of people there in colorful, matched T-shirts or signs or things like that, not just on zoning, but on a lot of other issues. So I'm open to hearing about it. But again, it's just, I think there are considerations that we really have to think about and maybe even get the public to weigh in on this a little bit. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Driggs, do you want to hear from Ms. Ajmira first?
Why don't we? Sure.
All right, Ms. Ajmira.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. So Mr. Winston and Ms. Watlington nailed it. this is an issue of equity. I can tell you from my personal situation, if the state of emergency would not have existed, I would not have been able to participate right now. Is that correct, Mr. Baker? Would I have been able to participate in council meeting, not committee, council meeting virtually if there was no state of emergency in place? I know we had discussed this, but I would like to hear from you here so that people who have not had an opportunity to review it, they can hear firsthand from you.
You are correct.
Yes. So I think this is really an issue of equity where it prevents young women from being able to serve in a public office. I have been, I guess, you know, I don't want to go in my personal situation here, but I don't think we should prevent pregnancy is just one situation here. We should not prevent anyone from accessing or being able to serve in a public office, because at the end of the day, that is not our decision. That is the decision of charlatans. So I think we got to look at this issue from equity perspective. That's all. Thank you.
So I just want to point out a lot of what we're hearing illustrates what in my mind is the kind of complexity here. You have Monday nights, you have committees, you have closed sessions. We have some latitude under state law to make decisions about our meetings. On the other hand, there are some caveats. So the School of Government, the North Carolina School of Government, pointed out to us, for example, that if you have a majority decision that is reached and the deciding votes were virtual, that could be open to a legal challenge. And my only point all along is we need to be more thoughtful about this, which is why I would like to take on board in committee some suggestions. Like when you say we need more freedom, or if there are circumstances like an expectant mother, whatever, let's hear what they are, let's hear what the ideas are, and then we can kind of put them into the context of a legal, but also more practical concerns. And we've heard about them tonight. I'm also in favor of in-person meetings. I have a concern that you could have one of those committee meetings where there are 8 cameras around and only 2 members of the committee are in the room. There are times when that's really not a place you want to go. So the other part of this that I think we need to be deliberate about is if we say for a good reason that we want to do that, let's make sure that that doesn't possibly lead to a bad outcome. Let's make sure that we have correctly thought through and anticipated some of the unintended consequences of a decision we might make. And once again, I don't think that we're going to get there tonight. So that's why I just keep repeating. I hope that we can agree that this is clearly something we need to work on. And there are clearly kind of thoughts about modifying Rule 28 as it now stands. But let's do one more round and get to a point where we can talk about specific proposals and their implications.
So I agree with Mr. Driggs. The legal review would be up to the attorney's office to look at the statutes to leverage what technology. Mr. Winston, Ms. Eggleston asked for best practices of other cities. Ms. Watlington talked about committee meetings and the 48-hour notice and what that could be here and what that can help or hinder. And then maintaining remote for the committee and in-person council members, particularly around the zoning, and to treat it as a macro, that was Mr. Bakari, a macro issue for all of council instead of just one. And then the council meetings virtual or committee meetings in person, and consider committee council meetings in person and committee meetings with some oversight virtual, and then the equity issue from Ms. Ajmira. So we've got lots of things for the committee to work on. I have to say the committee has redistricting, and that has a higher priority. But I also know there's a priority because this emergency declaration could go up at any time. I just want you to, weigh all of this that we have to do, and you've got a lot of work on your list. So,
Mayor, would you like a motion to send that to committee, or do you just want to do it yourself?
Oh no, it's already in committee.
Well,
I just think that I'm going to say I just think that this got worded in a way that didn't present the committees. We don't have the committee's deliberations and notes in here, but I think a lot of this was discussed in the committee. I don't know if the committee members would agree with this, but the motions are stated here. But I think the idea, Mr. Driggs has always said all along the way, let's hear from council members. And I think we've heard from those, some tonight, and written, and please email or let Mr. Driggs know if you have additional comments or have other thoughts. So I don't think we need a motion for referral. All right, so the next item on our agenda is item number 16. I'm sorry, Mr. Phipps?
Yeah, I just wanted to make the council aware of a technical correction that's needed on page 202. It says that the budget and effectiveness committee met on December 1st, 2021. So that's obviously wrong.
That will happen in due course, just wait.
Set up that meeting. That'll be the Christmas eggnog meeting. Okay.
I'm so impatient.
All right, the next item on our agenda is adopt a resolution authorizing the manager to execute a municipal agreement with NCDOT and the amount of $912,000 for infrastructure upgrades associated with Pineville Matthews safety improvements.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Iselt?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Phipps?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
Yes.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Thank you. The next item is item 17, adopt a resolution ratifying an interlocal agreement with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Stormwater Services for future alignment of a portion of sanitary sewer project through the Mecklenburg County purchased properties.
Motion to adopt. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All right. Any discussion? Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Phipps?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
Yes.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Okay, tonight the City Council is considering nominations to various boards and commissions. The council members submitted their nominations earlier to the clerk today. Names of nominees will not be read tonight. Tomorrow, the clerk will email the City Council names of applicants that received at least 2 nominations. These candidates will be considered for appointment at the next business meeting, which is going to be a long one, I would expect. Any applicant receiving 6 or more nominations can be considered for appointment tonight upon a motion and a vote of council. The names of all nominees will be recorded in the official minutes of the meeting, and the clerk will now proceed in announcing for each of the committees listed in the agenda.
For the Alternative Compliance Review Committee, actually, there are several committees that have received 6 or more votes, so if I could go through all of them and then have one motion at the end to
Okay.
appoint those people, it would probably go faster. For the Alternative Compliance Review Committee.
We can hear you, Ms. Kelly.
For the Alternative Compliance Review Committee, there was one appointment for a community representative, Padma Balusu, received 6 nominations. For the Real Estate Development Industry Representative, David Walters received 6 nominations. For the Beckler Arts Foundation Board, we will bring those back to you on June the 28th. For the Bicycle Advisory Committee, James Lee received 8 nominations. The Business Advisory Committee, a recommendation by the Certified SBE Hispanic Contractors Association, there were no recommendations from that body, so we will look to have recommendations by the next meeting. For the Charlotte Business Inclusion Advisory Committee, we will bring those back to you. There were several nominees, and we will bring those to you on June 28th. For the one appointment for the Charlotte Business Inclusion, the recommendation from the Carolinas Asian American Chamber of Commerce, Chai Bu received 11 nominations, as did Griselda Bailey, received 11 nominations. For the Charlotte International Cabinet, the one appointment for an airport staff member, Leela Lababi, received 6 nominations. For the at-large category representative, there were 2 appointments necessary. Mr. Muhammad received 9 nominations, as did the incumbent Reinhard von Hinnens. The incumbent received 9 nominations. For the, also with the Charlotte International Cabinet, the cultural ethnic category representative, the incumbents Kamal Himal received 8 nominations, as did Nolan Mulder. For the education nonprofit category, Rona Chin, the incumbent, received 10 nominations, and Maggie Cummings received 8 nominations. For the international business category representative, Janelle Coswell received 10 nominations. For the CRVA, the 2 at-large members, Kimberly Edmonds, the incumbent, received 11 nominations, and Vinay Patel, also an incumbent, received 10 nominations. For the Citizens Review Board, both incumbents, Tom Bowers and Tanya Jameson, received 10 nominations. For the Community Relations Committee, there was 1 appointment for a 3-year term and 1 appointment for a partial term. The incumbent, Braxton P. Coates, received 10 nominations, and Angela Abels received 8 nominations. For the Historic District Commission, the incumbent for the resident owner of Dilworth, Jill Walker, received 11 nominations. For the Historic Landmarks Commission, there were 2 appointments. The incumbent, Edwin Wilson, received 11 nominations, and the other position will come back to you at the June 28th meeting. For Keep Charlotte Beautiful, there were 5 appointments. There were Kyle Coulomb received 11 nominations. The incumbent, Lily Taylor, received 11 nominations. The incumbent, Delberto Torres, received 11 nominations. The incumbent, Nubia Umazar, received 11 nominations, and Tan Vu received 9 nominations. For the Passenger Vehicle for Hire, there were no nominations or applications received for the hospitality tourism industry. So we will come back with those at the June 28th meeting. For the Planning Commission, we will bring those nominations back to you for June 28th. Also for the Transit Services Advisory Committee and the Zoning Board of Adjustment, all will return to you on June 28th.
Motion to appoint all nominees with over 6 votes.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Let's go.
6 votes or more.
6 votes or more, right. Any discussion? All right, Mr. Graham? Yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Newton?
Yes.
Ms. Watlington?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Isel?
Yes.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes.
Mr. Phipps?
Yes.
Mr. Winston?
Yes.
Mr. Bakari?
Yes.
Mr. Driggs?
Yes.
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion to close.
We have a motion to close and adjourn. All right, thanks everyone for a good evening.